nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
A very good morning to you. It is Monday morning, the 20th of April, and you're very welcome along to OTB AM. We're here with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning at 7:30, all the way through until 10 o'clock while the lockdown continues. If you want to get involved in any of the conversations that we're having, you can join us on Twitter at OffTheBallAM, or of course you can text the show on 0879 180 180. That's a WhatsApp essentially. I'm going to tell you what's coming up on the show this morning. We've got a good half hour of Brian Kerr talking with John Duggan on Saturday first. Eoin joins us at 8 o'clock this morning. Sports pages. Busy enough day, to be honest, plenty going on in all the various sports leagues around the world as they try and grapple with what's coming next. We're going to speak with the Director of Communications from the GAA, Alan Milton, around about 8:35 this morning. The big thing that we're doing today is Wexford's Mt Rushmore. Two Wexford legends themselves, Diarmuid, Lyng and Liam Griffin, are going to help us parse through the various strands of sporting excellence that a county like Wexford has. And then very briefly, we're going to preview the player ratings that we're going to be given after the finale of Season 5 of Better Call Saul, which is on tonight, actually. So that's our player ratings that we've been doing over the last number of weeks. Myself and Eoin and Joseph Conroy will tell you a bit more about that a little bit later on too as well. But as ever, if you want to get involved, use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter. First though, here's some Brian Kerr goodness. Enjoy.
That was the only game I missed in England's group, actually. The group was Mexico, France, England and Uruguay, and I saw the rest of the games of the group, and then I stayed on. My brother remarkably was able to get tickets for England's quarter-final against Argentina, the semi-final against Portugal, the third-place playoff, Portugal and Russia, and the final itself against West Germany. I don't know how he did it, how he managed it, but what I do know is that the man for tickets, even for the World Cup itself in England, wasn't anything like it would be in these modern times. I mean, he wasn't particularly interested in football himself. He was interested in boxing. But how he managed to do it, I don't know, particularly for the final. But one remarkable match I was at, John, and it is kind of strange to remember back on this. There was a match played in the White City Greyhound Stadium between France and Uruguay, and I often wondered why that was. Now, it was only in recent years I checked it out, and seemingly the reason was that that match was fixed for a Friday, and there was greyhound racing due in Wembley Stadium on the Saturday, and whoever owned Wembley Stadium decided that the greyhound racing had to go ahead on the Saturday, so the match was changed to the White City Greyhound Stadium. And that's how I ended up in White City. The only time in my life I was ever in White City Greyhound Stadium, although I think QPR played there after. But anyway, there I saw all those games, and I saw 5 of England's games out of the 6 games they played, including the remarkable final and the commentary that you just had there with Kenneth Wilson home, which I didn't hear till afterwards because I was at the match.
How much of a thrill was it on the day to be at the World Cup final, Brian? You're a young lad, you're a teenager, England against West Germany, and how vivid is it now? Well,
you know, it was massively exciting. I mean, at that time, we didn't see too much football on the television. You went to live games here. I was already going to international matches in Mount Park and watching the Irish team playing. But there weren't many home games in the season. There might be 3 or 4 maximum, I'd say. Other than that, our standard diet was of League of Ireland football, which I went to plenty of games, and the odd European match and so on, and junior football, which I went to plenty of. But so to go to the World Cup itself, I mean, I'd seen bits on the old Pata News coverage from 1962 and 58, little snippets and bits and pieces, but there was no real coverage as such, like a full games. It was the English Cup final, I think it was on the TV maybe 61, 62, I remember that with Spurs, Leicester, Spurs, Burnley, a couple of successive years there. Then West Ham and Preston with Alan Kelly and so they were the earliest matches. But we only maybe one or two matches a season. The odd England away match might be on television. So if you actually go to the World Cup and having, I was used to reading the history of the World Cup and the start, the origins of it, and to go and see the games and these players. We didn't know much about the continental players. I knew a lot about Portugal because Benfica were a top team at the time with so many fantastic players. But, we were only reading about the other players from the Soviet Union, from Mexico, Argentina. I mean, Brazil were there. We knew about Brazil, but we didn't get to see Brazil because they got knocked out. They played up in the Northwest. And
Goodison, yeah.
They got knocked out by they were in the group with Portugal
and Hungary. Yeah.
Portugal, Hungary was the fourth team in the group. But anyway, they got knocked out, so we never got to see Brazil. They didn't even get through the group.
Bulgaria, I think they were.
Bulgaria is the fourth team. Yeah, four in each group, 16 teams. Top two getting through to the quarterfinal. Quarterfinal was played on a Saturday. I remember well the match with Argentina, a famous game for the sending off of the captain Ratti, and he refused to go off the pitch, and the game's held up. I remember it being very, very hot, John, and been standing on the terrace behind the goal that England were defending at the time, and at the far end there was a scoreboard because there was another match on at the same time, Portugal and North Korea, and there was no kind of automatic scores coming up. A guy had to physically go out and put up a score when there was a goal. So you could see him walking along this kind of a platform very high up over Wembley Stadium. And we presumed he was going over early on to put the first goal for Portugal. But he proceeded on to North Korea and put up one. So it was Portugal and North Korea 1. And then he went back again and went 2. And then he went back again and went 3. So North Korea were 3 up. That was nearly more entertaining than the England match.
Yeah.
Because the match was dull. And
Daniel McDonnell, you got the names now of those scoreboard operators who are from Ireland.
Eddie O'Keefe and Michael O'Sullivan were two lads from Waterford who basically, they'd left secondary school and they went to go to England in the 60s, as a lot of people did. So they went to the Labour Exchange and they were given 2 options in the Labour Exchange to get some work. They offered us 2 things: working in the gardening section for the council or working in Wembley Stadium for the World Cup. There wasn't much competition and they soon graduated to the scoreboard, and that's how they ended up doing the scores for the final. I'm not sure if they were doing it on that quarter-final day that Brian mentioned. By the time the final came round, they graduated to the top job. So there we go.
Well, can you believe?
Sorry, Johnny. It's mad that Brian mentions that because, and this is a game that'll be very, very close to his heart. When I was looking back on the North Korea-Portugal game, and I was thinking, where have I seen a game before when one team was 3-0 up and lost 5-3, and straight away Shelbourne against Rangers in Prenton Park in Tranmere, and that particular game clashed with St. Pat's getting a 0-0 draw with Celtic, and I watched the Pats. Yeah, I watched that game, Brian, in Yonkers in New York. I remember I spent the summer in New York, and all I could do was try to find a place where I could watch Pats and Celtic. I just got into League of Ireland at the time. But one of the most memorable aspects of that game was the scoreboard coming through from Prenton Park. Rangers 1-0 down to Shelbourne, 2-0 down to Shelbourne, and 3-0 down to Shelbourne. And this came up on the screen, and everyone in the pub was laughing it up.
Well, what I remember, from the game, I think the lad that was the Waterford lad, if it was him, he had a white coat on him like an umpire in Crow Park, maybe doing a match, right? And he had to walk across. I'd say there might have been danger money involved, and that's why they took it rather than cutting the grass in the parks. They might have been extra because they had to climb up the ladder, I think, and walk across this narrow platform, and to get out as far as North Korea was a good bit out now. Not North Korea, the place, just the edge of just the edge of where North Korea
North Korea was always hard to get to.
it was hard and hard to get into and hard to get out of. Anyway, by the time he got to 3, anyway, there was a lot of oohs and ahs in the crowd because the English game was quite dull, right? And then I think if memory serves me right, not too long after it was 3-0, Portugal got going. Eusebio started doing the stuff, and Torres and Coluna and Simões, the little fella Simões, a very good player. Gusto, they had a really good team, Portugal. Anyway, the goals started coming. I think maybe by half time it was 3-2, and ultimately, as she said, it was 5-3, and Eusebio got 4 goals. So I was looking forward to seeing that semi-final game, which was a great game. The game England-Portugal in the semi-final, and Bobby Charlton got the 2 goals. But Eusebio, the brilliance of Eusebio, I mean, he Mozambique player, he was such an athlete. There was such style and power about him. And funny enough, I actually sat beside him one day at an international match in Dublin when we played Portugal a good few years back, and if ever I was in awe of someone, I rarely asked someone for his autograph, but I did that day. But I couldn't explain to him that I'd seen him in 1966. I kind of wanted to, but that was a brilliant game, and that was at the third place playoff with Russia, and I think it came down to a late penalty. It was 1-1, and it was Eusebio against the legendary Lev Yashin in goal for Russia, and I was in line with the penalty spot where Eusebio was going to take the penalty, and I kind of, Yashin was a hero of mine. We were kind of, he was one of those guys we knew. He wore all black. As a goalkeeper, he was all black with just the number 1 on his back, right? But anyway, Eusebio buried the penalty, and I think I remember Eusebio going up and shaking hands with him after he scored the penalty, and then picked up the ball and ran back to the halfway line with it. And so they won the third place playoff, 2-1 win. That would have been probably on the Friday night, and then the final was on Sunday. So the final was on Saturday. So I was back and forward to Wembley a few times that week. Sometimes I was brought by people, friends of my brothers, but I kind of remember being at the matches on my own, and surviving without any bother. So you imagine a kid at 13 days' time going to matches to walk up final on his own. There you are.
Yeah, 53106. Dogs on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday was a bigger earner than football for the owners. Great night out in London. Great programme, lads. That is from Seamus and Killarney. Brian Kerr spent many days in Harold's Cross Greyhound Stadium when he was manager of St. Pat's. That is from Martin. This is just gas. We got a text in here. My husband, Eddie O'Keefe, and his friend Michael O'Sullivan from Waterford were scoreboard keepers in 1966 in Wembley for the World Cup. That's from Colette O'Keefe in Waterford. Colette, fair play to you for texting
Colette,
in.
get the man on the show.
Brian, what was that final like?
Well, look, I think most people are interested in football. I've seen it in some of it. The guys is now, he's been dickied up in full colour and all now. It was a remarkable match to be at. I remember things like every German person in the ground seemed to have a yellow, red and black flag, small flags, and I can see them waving English flags. I can't really remember so much of that, but there was a lot of various flags and banners around the place. But remarkable atmosphere. Again, very warm day. I remember I was sitting not too far from the Queen actually as that happened. I was up. I don't know how my brother pulled that one out, but I had a £3.10 ticket that was up not too far from the Royal Box, right? So I had a very, very good view of the match. I mean, the change in fortunes, the scoreline, the match 2-1, England looking like they're going to win it. And late goal for Germany to get it back, goes to extra time. Horst gets the 3 goals. I remember being disappointed Greaves wasn't playing because he was one of my heroes, Jimmy Greaves. He played in a couple of the group games, but he got injured, I think, in the last group match against France, and then he didn't play in the quarter-final and semi-final. And Alf Ramsey stuck with, Horst, Peters, Hunt, the midfield, with Ball and Charlton, Styles in the middle of the pitch. So Graves didn't get a game in the final, which was, given the outstanding player he was, an outstanding goal scorer of that era for a long, long period, right through the 60s and into the 70s. He was a fabulous player. But I remember being personally disappointed that Graves didn't play. But, Horst's performance on the day and the goals and the controversy of the ball and the goal come down off the crossbar. Is it goal? Is it not? I'm waiting to see. It was just unbelievable. I was probably too young to appreciate how astonishing it was to be at a World Cup final as a kid, and to understand the tactical side of the game, because it was a new game, a new style in terms of England, the work rate in 4 midfield players, no wingers. You know, he played Terry Payne in one of the matches. He played Ian Callaghan in one of the matches. But as he got to the quarter-final, semi-final, the final, didn't play wingers at all. They were all midfield players playing the wide positions. And then, Wilson and Cohn as the full-backs, Charlton, Moore, the elegance of Moore. But Jeremy had brilliant players as well. Young Beckenbauer, Snellinger, one of the full-backs. I remember Zuvi Seeler, centre-forward, baldy fella. Ziggy held up front with him. Seeler actually was one of those that played in the League of Ireland. You know that question, name the World Cup winners who played in the League of Ireland, and people always forget Uwe Seeler played, I think, a match for Cork Celtic when he had some relationship with Cork.
That is gas, that story. I never knew that.
Well, there you are. There's one for. I think he wasn't young. Like he wouldn't have got in. He would have been. He would have been a banger for under 35 football now. I think he was in the 40s when he played for Cork Celtic. But Uwe Seeler, and then they came and won it the next time round. But Seeler, I thought, was a great player. Haller got the first goal. I think he was second highest scorer after Eusebio at that World Cup. But it was just sensational to think back. And I haven't been at a final since, I have to say. You've been at a final since, John, one or two, have you?
One, and Daniel's been at, I think, three.
Three, yeah.
Did you keep any memorabilia, Brian?
I did. Somewhere stashed in the attic, and I'm not bad at holding stuff. But one thing that sticks in my mind was coming out of the last group match England played was Mexico, and I remember leaving the game. I'm not sure after the second game England played Mexico. England beat Mexico 2-0, but I think it meant that Mexico were gone because they drew the first match with France 1-1. But on the way out of the game, in the car park, a Mexican fan gave me his hat, his sombrero, and what he had on it was, the old, the kind of badges he used to get, up England to be on it, or up Spain, or those kind of flowery sort of cresty sort of a thing. You pin them on horses. What do you call them when they win?
Rosettes, is it?
Rosettes.
Yeah, rosette sort of a yoke. Yeah.
The Tories wear them, Brian. The Tories wear them.
Who wears them?
We'll get the Tories next week.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the rosettes. A man had a load of them pinned to the sombrero. They were of the competing teams. And he must have been leaving, it must have been the end of his trip to England. And he saw me walking through the car park. And he came over to me and he presented it to me. Right? So I used to wear it going to the matches with all the different teams. And when you think of it now, like you can't go to a match and wear the opposition's colours and stuff. I didn't care at the time. But I have that stashed away somewhere in the programme, and some pins and bits and pieces. Yeah, I have them. I have some of that stuff still stashed around. I think I have some tickets as well. I think I have the stub of the £3, 10 shillings ticket as well.
Radio Go, lads. What a great show that is from Jason of Walkinstown. Nice one, Jason. Brian, how different was life back then?
How different was life? It's a good while ago. Well, life was all about, competing. For me, and most of the kids of my age, it was about going to sport, not so much watching sport on the television, because it was much more scarce. I mean, there would have been a bit of horse jumping on the telly on the BBC midweek from the White City indoor arena, and we'd have been watching, Seamus Hayes and Good Boy winning things, and Tommy Wade and John Drama horses winning things. That would be on at the odd night, and there'd be cricket on the telly. But there wasn't an awful lot of sport on the telly or football. So I think, like most kids, you were out doing things most of the day. You were out playing sport, playing football, playing whatever, playing hurling, or going to sport. I mean, I went to sports, all sorts of sports. I tell people this, they kind of think I'm a bit mad. Like, I once went to a water polo international competition for the weekend out in Blackrock. Bats, outdoor bats. Went to see Wales. I think it was Wales, Scotland, England and Ireland. But I would have gone to anything. I would have went to boxing. I would have been going to Crow Park, watching hurling, football, watching anything. You know, League of Ireland, all sorts of stuff. I think it was motor racing up in the Phoenix Park. So that's what life is like for us, was finding a few, you know, getting the money to get into things and finding your way to it, getting buses, travelling to events, going to school. It was fairly simple, but the competitive levels of the sport where I lived in Drimna was very, very high, because there were so many playing and so much activity. There was no lifts to school or lifts to training or getting it. You know, what you had to go. Your parents kind of showed you the way and let you off, and you had to do it. But you know, I know I used to save my bus fare that I got to go to school. I used to save it. I used to run to school instead and save the money for whatever I wanted. That might involve saving money to go in to see Pats playing or go to an international match or whatever. But you know, I don't think I was that unusual. I think most kids were like that the same. They appreciated getting to games, live sport, and learning about the sports by watching fellas playing, rather than getting it explained to you on the telly by people, by pundits and fellas like that. He says, as a pundit.
Lads, you want to come in there?
I'd be interested, Brian, to, maybe you're not necessarily the right person to ask this, because first of all, you were mad in sport, and second of all, you lived in Dublin. But what was the sporting landscape like in Ireland at that time? Because Micheál Murphy was on Nathan's dad, and he was saying, from his perspective, there wasn't that much interest in soccer as it would have been known. From a personal perspective, it would have been around the time Galway won the 3 in a row in Gaelic football. And what was the place that soccer, or football as we would call it, had in the national discourse at that time, and did 66 change it?
Well, I think in Dublin soccer was very prominent, and always very prominent. Probably less so in many of the provincial towns until the 66 World Cup, and then of course in Ireland particularly with the Charlton years and the emergence of soccer and soccer clubs in every town and village in the country after that. But at that time, certainly in Dublin, soccer was prominent, but because the educational structures were dominated by the clergy, and particularly the Christian Brothers, who were generally rural people, there was a lot of emphasis on Gaelic games in school. I mean, I played from the time I went to primary school. I played Gaelic, I played hurling, football, you know, kind of almost every day there was hurling football in school, and training for the teams and going to watch the teams. I mean, we were strong in St Michael's and Inchicore. We were in the finals every year. It seemed to be as the seniors, as the juniors, as they were called, under 12 or 14s would be in the finals, and there was great rivalries with other schools around Dublin. But we would have, like, I would have went to the Railway Cup finals. You know, religiously is a strange word to use now these days, but I would have went to the Railway Cup finals every year, I'd say, from the time I was about 7. You know, I would have seen, you know, Mick Mackey and Christy Ring and those fellas playing at that time. And, you know, they were legendary fellas. You knew you were going to see something special, even if Leinster weren't playing. I remember some of the times we went, Leinster wouldn't be playing. Other times they would be playing. Like, I was there the day that Leinster played in the 2 finals, and I think there's Foley played in both matches. He played in the hurling, then he played in the football final for Leinster. Can you imagine that? You play the 2 matches, one after the other, and you play in both of them. Like, you're not come on as a sub, you start in both matches. But you know, there was lots going on, but there was, I mean, in my head, soccer was the main thing. I was kind of surrounded by where I lived, by people who kind of loved the game, and we could go and watch high-level games. Like I said, we could go to Diarmuid, you could go to Talca Park easy enough, you could go to Milltown, but of course for me it was the Holy Grail, was in Inchicore, and I could actually walk to it, and I could run out of school and get down to the ground, which we did for cup replays. I remember midweek was just waiting for the moment for the bell to go that we could run out and get down to the ground. It was only, I'd say, 100 yards from the gate of the school to the Styles where St. Pat's played. But, you know, we were very aware of the strength of Gaelic games. And boxing, I think at that time, boxing was strong at that time. Athletics as well, because of Ronnie Delaney's successes. I would have went to the Morton Stadium on a regular basis, Santry as it was called then, to see athletics events with Eamon Cochran was my mate, and we used to go with his dad, and we go to Santry Stadium to see, you know, there would be big international events there in the summer, and you'd be seeing people who had ran in the Olympics or were medal winners at the Olympic Games in maybe 1960, and they'd be running in Santry Stadium. So that was life was about getting through school and waiting on the next big sporting event that you could go to, you know, like whether it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but even midweek, particularly in the brighter nights and brighter summer days, you would go to events in midweek.
53106. Ireland played West Germany shortly before the 1966 World Cup in Delhi. Ireland lost 4-0 by Uncle Bobby Gilbert, won his only cap in that game. Well done, Brian. This is Brian Kerr, who's been very generous to come on the show and tell us his memories of the 1966 World Cup. It's our feature year today. He was at the final when England beat West Germany 4-2. Well done, Brian, for saying an overage player is a banger. That's from the Walkinstown Beckenbauer. Dan, you want to come in on anything there?
Listen, I don't know where to come in. I'm just happy to listen to a lot of this. I'm actually curious, Brian. I know it was well before your time managing St. Pat's. I'm trying to think if you were 13 and 66, 1977, what sort of 24, 25. Gordon Banks played that one game for his Pats against Shamrock Rovers. I don't know if you were there or have any sort of recollection of, you know, that
I wasn't there, Daniel. At the time, I was managing somebody else at the time. I'm not sure what team. It was probably Shell's B team. And I missed it. I missed that game, but I've read about it, heard, and I remember at the time being fascinated by it because again, Gordon Banks was such a hero. You know, anyone who had an interest in football. I mean, he was such a nice guy. He had a legendary career. He was so loyal to Stoke. He played for Stoke, and you know, he never went to one of the kind of teams that were always winning. Let's say there was no traditional top six as them, but he didn't go. And, you know, he had lost the eye in a car accident. He played a bit in America. And then he played a match for Pats Rovers. Pats win 1-0, I think.
Pats and Rovers anyway, yeah. I think he was 40 at the time.
He made a legendary save from Eamon Dunphy shot to me out of the top corner. He hadn't played too much, I think, before it. But it was only one game. Pat had a kind of a history of that sort of getting in players, in either English or Scottish players were well known. Barry Bridges was the manager for a few years and he used to bring in players. Remember, there's a Scotch fella, George Luke, and then there's another manager, John Coleraine, Scottish manager. He played for Celtic and he managed player manager of Glentoran when they did very well in the European Cup, got to the quarter-final. And he came to Pats as well. So they were off, and they used to have a bit of money from the bingo at that time. They ran the bingo in several venues around the general area of Inchicore, which I think was quite successful. So they were able to afford to bring in some exotic players, I would have said nearly at that time, exotic in terms of their history. So, you know, I did miss that one, unfortunately. But, you know, that kind of happened, Daniel, as I got more involved in coaching and managing. I wasn't going as much to see them because I was at Shells, like, two spells at Shells. I was playing at Shells, 17, 18, a year in the B team, and then I managed their B team twice. I managed Rovers youth team when I was 20 actually. I managed Rovers youth team. So I would have been busy with the teams I was managing. I was trying to play a bit as well, not very well, but I was trying to play. So I'd missed a good bit of League of Ireland stuff as I got older because I was directly involved in Sundays and the matches. The Friday night stuff suited me better.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
This is OTB Sports Radio, Thursday Night Football with John Giles.
Who was that talking?
Troy Deeney.
Well, I think he should keep his mouth shut and have more respect for the opposition when he plays against them. And look at himself. If he was such a great player and was able to do all the things that he's talking to other people not doing, he wouldn't be on the bench. He'd be out there playing.
The best analysis of all the week's football from Ireland's #1 football man.
Obviously, after the Munich disaster, it was thrust on Bobby. And there was an awful lot of pressure on Bobby. He was carrying the team, and he handled himself brilliantly, and he played unbelievable stuff.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
Yeah, you're very welcome along this Monday morning. Hope you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, or if you're just rolling out of bed, then you're also welcome. You're probably especially welcome. It is Monday, the 20th of April. That's our public service done for the day, telling you what day it is. Eoin, Sheahan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Not too bad, Ger. What's the crack?
Not much. Busy enough sports page, which we'll get to in just a couple of minutes. Obviously, the only reason people are tuning in at the moment is to see who we're going to put on Mount Rushmore, and then the next day who we're going to take off that Mount Rushmore and put back on that Mount Rushmore. So today we're doing Wexford, and I actually hadn't really considered Wexford's sporting prowess until yesterday evening when we were looking through this, and it turns out they're pretty good.
It's pretty harsh, yeah. I think many people from Wexford will say that they always knew that they were one of the powerhouses of Leinster, and they just get placed in the shadow of their neighbours in Dublin, for example, or perhaps in one sport, their neighbours from Kilkenny. But there's a nice little spread we've got across Wexford, I think it's fair to say. Like this is far from a hurling / camogie Mount Rushmore. There could be a footballer there. There could be a soccer player in there. There's certainly going to be a rugby player in there, I would have thought. And there's probably going to be a shout for a racing or a boxing name in there as well. So we've got a lot of people to talk about, and as well one of Ireland's best Paralympic swimmers as well. So it's hard to know how many hurlers actually get culled for some of their less prominent sports to actually get chiselled out on the mountain.
So you're putting Tadhg Furlong in? Is that what you're saying straight off the bat? You're putting him in ahead of Gordon Darcy?
I don't know about that. I think that it's very much a debate, one or the other. I think one of them have to make it. And there's always, it seems that there's been a slight bias against players who are currently playing at the moment. In terms of, Cork was all former stars. Granted, they were all legends. Mayo, you still have Cora Staunton playing from that Mount Rushmore. Shane Lowry, I guess, is another sports star who's currently made it to the Mount Rushmore, but it's tough to be a current player and make it to Mount Rushmore. There's definitely a bit of nostalgia that goes with this sort of thing, which might work in Gordon Darcy's favour. Then again, Tadhg Furlong is the best player in his position ever in an Ireland shirt, which definitely strengthens his case. So I don't know, which way are you going on that one? I'd probably be leaning just towards Tadhg Furlong at this point.
Yeah, look, Tadhg Furlong, you're future-proofing yourself for what's coming next in the rest of his career. But at the same time, there's definitely something about the person who's on the team that wins the first thing in a long time. There's no way that the Tadhg Furlong team wins a Grand Slam if the team that Gordon Darcy's on doesn't win a Grand Slam. And I guess it comes down to how important was Darcy as a portion of that versus how important was Furlong as a portion of that. But bear in mind, Gordon Darcy is part of the Leinster team that establishes Leinster as one of the best teams in world rugby, that lives through the era where they're getting completely annihilated in the papers every time they open it up, where one of their players got a 0 out of 10 in player ratings one time. That to come through and to be part of that, I think that's important. I would certainly value all of those sporting achievements which include a moment where you make a breakthrough as being more important than the teams who follow on, because you're standing on the shoulders of giants.
But you're speaking as if the Tadhg Furlong team has already achieved more than the Gordon Darcy team. They're destined to, for sure, but Gordon Darcy has 3 Heineken Cups that Tadhg Furlong's won at the moment. And you talk about future-proofing, Mount Rushmore is not about future-proofing, it is about the here and the now. We are going up ourselves, you and I are going up with our chisels today, and our ropes and our safety equipment to actually chisel out this mountain today. There is no future proof about it. There will be a 2020 asterisk beside it, and people will understand that in the future. So who is the greatest star now? And I think that even in the here and the now, it is 100% still a conversation. Gordon Darcy, right up there, is one of the best centres Ireland has ever produced, going up against the best tight head Ireland has ever produced. So it's going to be a titanic tussle. We're going to have Liam Griffin and Diarmuid Lyng on later on to actually decide that one. And like maybe do both of them perhaps have a shout at making it?
I'd be surprised if two GAA lads stick on two rugby lads on the Mt Rushmore. I would be surprised if that was to happen.
Well, of course, I mean, the Tadhg Furlong and Gordon Darcy aren't too far away from the GAA sphere themselves.
No.
Like Tadhg Furlong, a great fullback. Gordon Darcy tells the story of working, what's the name of the hotel in Wexford when the 96 team came home with Liam Griffin, of course, and Liam McCarthy. They both have GAA threads in their childhoods.
They do. They definitely do. The Ferry Carrig, that was the name of the hotel.
The Ferry Carrig, that's it.
I think Tadhg Furlong was more of a rampaging centre half, wasn't he? Centre half back, or kind of midfielder. Stick the big lad who can run all day in midfield. Isn't the YouTube footage of him annihilating some child when he was a man-child? I think he's playing midfielder, or is he full back?
He's full back.
He's stormed out from full back, has he, all the way to the halfway line?
Yeah, I'm watching it here. The pace of the hands of Tadhg Furlong, certainly wearing the number 3 jersey here,
okay.
destroying a number 7 and destroying his opposition fullback, which tells you exactly where he is on the pitch, that he's killed the opposition fullback. Maybe 3 was a fairly trivial number to put on his back. Maybe he was everywhere, but certainly the sleight of hand existed there from a big man, and quite the footballer as well.
Darcy travelled on 2 Lions tours, but Furlong obviously starts. He nails down the starting position on the Lions tour, and how many Six Nations championships has Furlong won? Is it 3? Is it 2?
Six Nations champion. Only we
won a Grand Slam, but they won another one under.
But I don't think Tadhg Furlong. Like, you've got to understand, Tadhg Furlong only came along in 2015. Like, it's a very recent thing. Did we? So you got 16, 17 before that. Like, do we win one of those championships before we get to 18? You'll have the list there in front of you, I presume. Or
no, that's why I'm trying to work out what Joe Schmidt has won.
But I'm pretty sure 2018 is his only championship. If you go back through the last winners of the competition, which I've of course bringing up here, we always tend to forget the ones that we don't win. England won 16 and 17. So Tadhg Furlong's first championship and only championship was the Grand Slam.
Okay,
yeah.
So he wasn't part of 14 or 15.
No.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like an oversight on our partner to stick him in the team, right? Was Mike Ross was still around for those, right? Okay. Well, I don't know. Then you suddenly get to the point where it's like 50-50 and.
Oh yeah, like this is one hell of a debate, sure. I'm leaning barely towards Tadhg Furlong, and it's just because of the fact that you can't really dispute his position as Ireland's greatest tight head. But like, maybe that's not an actual fair comparison, because we haven't exactly had the same history of producing tight head props as we have had in terms of producing midfielders. And like Gordon Darcy to have nailed down such a long running partnership with possibly Ireland's greatest ever rugby player deserves more recognition than it gets. I know it gets plenty of recognition. Nobody's saying that Darcy's an underdog or an unknown quantity or anything like that. It's far from the case. It's such a tight one. And like, if you go on medals won and current honours, like Gordon Darcy wins. But I guess there is a sense about this Leinster team and this Ireland team that there will be possibly a few more Six Nations championships. Definitely, you'd think a few more Heineken Cups coming Tadhg Furlong's way.
Oh, and how do we feel about lobbying on behalf of certain people or players? Or how do we feel about like Facebook groups deciding that they're going to run their own competition here so that we would be well informed? I'm thinking here of Liam Spratt, the legendary broadcaster from Southeast Radio, who has decided that there's 2 hurling lads on this. Hell or high water, lads, there's 2 hurling lads on this.
Well, like, if you talk about lobbying, I will 100% put my hands up and say I'm the most corrupt man in the world and will take your bribes. So if you wanted to bribe me to actually make a case, a very strong case to Liam Griffin or Diarmuid Lyng, I might have to give them a financial cut myself. Then I'm absolutely open to that. Just slide into my DMs and I will take your money.
So Damien Fitzhenry romped home in the poll with like a landslide. Liam Dunn was second, Liam Griffin was third, and Larry O'Gorman was fourth in that poll. But Damien Fitzhenry was the second hurler. I presume one of the records, I presume Nicky was hurling number 1. I actually just can't find it there in front of me at the moment. Yeah. Does Billy Walsh get a mention in this?
Yeah, definitely. Of course Billy Walsh gets a mention in this. Like, Walsh and Adam Nolan, of course, the other boxing name that would come to mind from Wexford. But what Billy Walsh did for Irish boxing, almost best represented by his absence in 2016, and what a terrible occasion that was for Irish boxing. Like, he's phenomenal, one of the best coaches in Irish sports history, completely transformed our fortunes on the world stage. Like, I think there's 100% a conversation to be had for Billy Walsh. Like, it's, as you say, you might not have thought it when you start thinking about Wexford, but there is going to be a Cork-like element to this where legends will be omitted from this list. This is not easy, this one, and Billy Walsh has to be up there. Like, you talk about training and coaching greats. Like, in the training sphere, you'd have to have Aidan O'Brien, Jim Bolger in that conversation too.
Well, so like Aidan O'Brien is 100% a Wexford. So even though I would have associated him more obviously with Tipperary, and there's also some Kilkenny links there, but he's 100% a Wexford man. Grew up there. There's no way on the planet that we can't have Aidan O'Brien on. Like, there's a case for Aidan O'Brien on our national Mt Rushmore. So you have to assume he's making it on the Wexford one, right? Here's Diarmuid. I've already had thinking about this. The hurling heads I'd have etched into the Black Stairs Mountains would be Nicky Rackard, George O'Connor, Dara Ryan, Damien Fitzhenry. But sporting heads, very different. Aidan O'Brien has to be on. Like, there's no ifs, ands or buts, right?
Well, I think it'll be interesting once we get to Kilkenny. I think once we get into the Willie Mullins conversation, I think that will be an absolute definite. And maybe we don't appreciate the greatness of our flat trainers as much as our national hunt trainers, and that isn't right given what Aidan O'Brien has achieved. And he, by the same token, he should be on this list. Like, you're talking about. So if you go back through the rugby players that certainly don't lack appreciation, I think one of them has to be on it. I think there's probably going to be two human beings who have wielded some version of a stick on this. So it could be Rackard, it could be one of the great camogie players from the 4 All-Irelands that won between 2007 and 2012. I think between hurling / camogie and rugby, you're only going to be left with one head left in that mountain. And it could be a shootout between Billy Walsh, Aidan O'Brien, and then a potential Gaelic football wildcard. Like, there's going to be, or an association football wildcard. There could be a lot of Kevin Doyle / Matty Ford love as well later on. We just don't know how our judges are going to fall. So no, I actually don't think that Aidan O'Brien is a guarantee, to be honest. I think that actually, if he's going to make it, he could be the fourth man in.
Can you make a case for Mick Wallace here? Good pizzas.
Absolutely, and I think Mick Wallace should be. If we did a culinary four heads of Wexford, he'd be up there. Mick Wallace's pizza beside Croke Park does a fine folded pizza. I think it's fair to say, as opposed to setting up a football club. I mean, there's a big legacy of actually creating a sport or being one of the engines behind a sports club in a county. So. No is the answer to your question, obviously. But maybe he's worth a mention.
Great pink jerseys as well. Tyke Furlong, Matty Ford, we haven't mentioned him. Nicky Rackard, Billy Walsh, wildcard Zorro, says Father Ed O'Toole, who's a fake priest, obviously, according to his own Twitter bio. I don't know what the Zorro connection is. Is anybody going to inform us or explain to us if that's in any way serious? Because if it is, I mean, obviously, that's an impressive career, longevity.
The real Zorro was from Wexford. Born William Lamport in 1611, Guillaume Lombardo lived a swashbuckling life, writes a piece in the Irish Times in 2017. I will get to the bottom of this. The story of William Lamport, he was born in Wexford town around the year 1611, the youngest of 4 children from a noble family, which came to Ireland with Strongbow. In his teens, he was sent to London to study, but got in trouble with university authorities for distributing pro-Catholic pamphlets. He ran off with a gang of pirates and ended up in northern Spain, where, having joined an Irish regiment and changed his name to Guillaume Lombardo, he came to the attention of the Duke of Olivares, the most influential official at the court of Philip IV.
Wow.
So there you go. William Lamport. I don't know why I'm giving that a soft T at the end. William Lamport was the Irishman who became Zorro.
Wow, that is pretty impressive, and I'm surprised that we don't know a bit more about this. Not to rain on Kildare here, but if Kildare had a Zorro, we would know about it. Like, we kept Dan Donnelly's arms in a pub in Kilcullen for like a long period of time because they were very long arms, and that was like one of the great tourist attractions of the 80s in Kildare. If Kildare had Zorro, I'm pretty sure that you would know about it a lot. There'd be like it would, instead of the perpetual motion ball, it would have been like this, just the giant Z. I mean, come on. Right, go on, one last thing.
I wasn't sure if Zara was Spanish or Mexican back in the day, but it turns out he's actually Wexican.
14 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTB AM. If you want to get in touch with us on Monday the 20th of April, feel free to do so. 0879 180 180 is the number to WhatsApp, and we'll monitor those. You can also get us with the hashtag OTB AM. News headlines for you. Brighton Chief Executive Paul Barber says the Premier League clubs never discussed the option of declaring the season null and void. The Top Flight campaign has been suspended since the 13th of March. With 92 games still left to be played, Barber has this morning told Sky Sports News that there is a determination to finish the season. In rugby, a second Six Nations tournament could be played in 2020 as the sport's governing bodies look to recoup their lost earnings. It's being reported plans are being made to play a championship over an 8-week block in the autumn, should the touring Southern Hemisphere countries be forced to cancel their trips, which looks likely at this point. Ireland still obviously have 2 games from the original campaign left to play against Italy and France, with those being provisionally penciled in for September before the supplementary competition takes place. In tennis, Novak Djokovic may face an even longer delay in returning to tennis when the sport does resume. He says he opposes vaccinations, which may be required for players to be allowed to compete. The world number 1 says a vaccine may be compulsory for players in order to compete. Medical experts have said the vaccines against the respiratory virus will not be ready until next year, raising doubts whether any further tennis tournaments can be contested this year. I just need to do a bit more reading about Novak Djokovic here. Is this a general thing? Is he like anti all vaccinations?
I would have thought so. Like given what he said, like he says personally, I am opposed to vaccination. So when I saw that comment, I just assumed that's a catch-all phrase.
Right. Wow. Wow.
So,
well, then Novak, don't have the coronavirus vaccination when it comes, and don't play any more tennis.
Well, he said his thoughts might change.
Well,
at some point.
Oh, they might change, might they? Might they?
There's a lot of money on the line for your vaccination.
All of a sudden, you might find science important because it helps you. Ferrari's Sebastian Vettel doesn't think a shortened calendar would diminish winning a world championship. The opening 9 rounds of the Formula 1 season have been postponed or cancelled. And that is the latest sports news as it stands now. It is here's what's coming up on the show for you this morning. Obviously, we're going to bring in the sports pages now. Alan Milton, the GAA communications director, is going to join us around about 35 minutes past 8. We're getting into the Mt Rushmore of Wexford with Griffin and Diarmuid Lyng around about 9 o'clock. And then we'll bring you some player ratings or predicted player ratings about what might happen in the final episode of Better Call Saul this evening. No spoilers. That'll be our rule at 9:45, so don't worry about that. No spoilers for you. And we'll bring you another How's the Head as well a little bit later on. But now it is time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Okay, so first up here is offtheball.com. The 32 Mt Rushmore is episode 4, Wexford's greatest sports people. I mean, it's fairly obvious Tyke Furlong is whoever picked this story's main one, because he's got the biggest head and also the biggest surface area of the photographs here. So look, I mean, I think Tyke Furlong probably is going to make it. We'll have to wait and see. Great interview with Ronnie Whelan yesterday. I was crying on my own in the car. Bad news for Irish sport with mass gatherings in 2020. Highly unlikely. This was further confirmation really from Simon Harris yesterday that he said that mass gatherings are highly unlikely. This is kind of exactly what had been said by Varadkar a couple of weeks before that as well. And then Bob Dylan gives fans what they want but scarcely what they need. This is Arthur James O'Dea. The good doctor has given us his view on the latest 2 songs that Bob Dylan has released. And then the last one there is a story about Brian Ashton's time in charge of Ireland. His disdain for our skill level and fitness was pretty obvious. Brian Ashton was the Ireland rugby coach for a short period of time, but had a massive contract. I think he might have had a 6 or 7 year contract, and I'd say barely signed 18 months. Certainly didn't see out a very long period of time. Anyway, one of the first gigs I ever did was going to the Ireland All Blacks game, and then I remember sitting in the press conference afterwards, and he kind of looked at the press, and somebody asked him a question, and he was like, well, whatever they were doing out there, whatever that plan was, it wasn't my plan. I was like, wow, are all press conferences like this? This is amazing. The manager coach just completely throwing his team under that relationship did not last very long. It turns out if you are the head coach and you basically say your players are crap and that they can't do what you told them to do, it doesn't get on very well. It doesn't endear you to the team of people who are working with you or / for you. So that's what's first this morning. What have you got first?
The Irish Independent this morning leads with Croke Park faces prospect of closed season. So think Simon Harris's comments yesterday have kind of ratcheted this up to another level when he said it's highly unlikely we're going to be seeing very large kind of mass gatherings between now and 2021. I think most people would have assumed that was likely to be the case, or that was likely to be the official line at least. Like the idea of a closed season now is remains to be seen. It's certainly going to be. I would be astonished if any of us were at a GAA match before the end of the year. But whether or not GAA matches will happen, I think, is the big question. We'll get into that a little bit later on with Alan Milton. Do the players want it is possibly one of the questions that's going to be asked. Pressure, meanwhile, mounts on English clubs to pay £50 million television rights bill. So this is the EFL who will be forced to pay broadcasters at least 50 million quid if the season is abandoned in the 3 divisions, which is obviously a bill that a lot of those clubs cannot afford at the moment. And Rory O'Connor talking about the prospect of the Six Nations being played again this year. So you'd fulfil all the fixtures if games were to go ahead and then play all the games again. An emergency Six Nations basically in October and November. So he's dealing with the line there that Ireland may get an earlier than expected chance to avenge their humiliating defeat to England at Twickenham. So that would be quite something. Like, I mean, where does the club game fit in? If you can play off the international game, can you play off the club game? You would have thought you might be able to do so. And these cash-strapped unions, like the cash will only come if you have stadiums filled with people, unless there's an emergency television rights deal, which is extremely lucrative.
Yeah, or in any way lucrative. If it would be enough to pay everybody's salaries and keep them taken over, that might be enough to get them to next year when you can begin to have people back in stadiums. Or with the super stadiums, with something like the Aviva, with something like Croke Park, with something like Twickenham, could you have 1 in every 3 seats being used? Like, so that there's suddenly a capacity of 25,000 as opposed to for the 80,000 seaters and something smaller. Like, is there a possibility that this type of, is that the level, the granular detail you need to get to when you're having these conversations about what might be possible?
Yes, I think the answer to that question is yes, and it will be at some point. Like, I think even the prospect of social distancing at matches seems like a small bit of a pipe dream until the end of this year. But I think next year, like, I certainly wouldn't be ruling that out. But at the stadia where there's actual seating for everybody, like if you flip it back onto the GAA again, that's an extremely tough thing to police, where a lot of the grounds are predominantly terraces. But in all the kind of assigned seating stadiums in Ireland, so your Croke Park fixtures, you could like close the hill, your Croke Park fixtures and the Aviva Stadium, you could definitely try and maintain this. It would take probably an extra few staff to sort of loosely police it as well, in and around half time and before the matches and things like that. But that's probably going to be what we get to before we return to normal. The question is if that's a 2020 thing or not, and I would have my doubts.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, we can ask Alan Milton about this a little bit later on. Let's move on to the Irish Times for you there this morning. Is PGA Tour orders up to 1 million COVID testing kits. So this is Ewan Murray's story. It's a Guardian piece. Tour targets June 11th for first of 4 behind closed door tournaments. The PGA Tour hopes to take delivery of up to 1 million COVID-19 test kits to assist with completion of its season from June 11th. The next bit is US President Donald Trump's desire to use sport as a key vehicle to accelerate a return to normality in the United States is emphasised by a plan to allow those involved in PGA Tour events into the country under the auspice of essential travel. The Tour remains confident of pushing forward with tournaments given the scale of government backing. So Donald Trump's love of golf is going to be very important in him helping golf get back onto our screens. Who was it? Was it Keith Duggan had the line at the weekend about this is everybody's worst nightmare, a world where the only sport is golf. The only thing that you can do is play golf. Cam Cummins gives a story there about World Rugby are to investigate Francis Keane, the chairman of the Fiji Rugby Union and World Rugby Council member who was convicted of manslaughter in 2007 following allegations of rampant homophobia in the Sunday Times. Tiernan McCann has done an interview as well where he talks about online trolls needing to be nicer.
The Mirror this morning leads with weeping giants. One elite Premier League club is losing 9 million quid every week and is now desperate to take out £100 million loan just to keep afloat. Gooch has been talking. Cooper fears Championship won't get off the ground. And Wayne Rooney says United should build a team around classic number 9, Kane. And you've also got Alexander Ceferin there pictured. Play every 3 days to finish the Champions League is his view. The ideas get more and more intense as the days and weeks go by, it seems.
The Irish Examiner for you this morning there is sometimes we all go too far, but the game always returns us to what's most important in life. This is Anthony Daly, and it's a really great piece about his brother's battle with addiction and John Lahey and the role that John Lahey played in helping his brother. And it turns out that Dalo and John Lahey would have been going at each other quite forcefully as the Tip-Clare rivalry kind of took off. And there's some great details in this as well. When the sides met in '99, Liam Doyle and I were goading Lahey at every opportunity, trying to get a hop out of him. Nicky English had him completely focused, but eyed an angle for the replay. After the drawn game, some Tip supporters had set fire to curtains in one of the carriages on the train back to Clonmel. When a schmozzle kicked off early in the game and Lahey was stuck in the middle of it with Doyler, I let him have it. "I see you got the train home the last day." Lahey started roaring laughing. So did Tommy Dunn and Brian O'Mara. I got a fit of the giggles as well. So four or five lads falling around laughing in front of nearly 50,000 people in the middle of a row. I wouldn't mind watching those games again. I wouldn't mind like a 5-game saga every time they played. Throw in the league matches for good measure between Tip and Clare, because that's where all the main problems that Clare team ever had came from. Those rows. Was there also trouble with Waterford and Cork at various stages too? There was. Clare had a lot of trouble in those days, just not getting caught up in things. But yeah.
The Irish Daily Star this morning, top flight club losing €10 million a week. So this is what we heard from the Sun a moment ago. They might need a €115 million loan to pay players as lockdown debts keep climbing. It was like a war zone. It was nothing to do with football. 20 years on, David O'Leary exclusive on a night of hell in Istanbul. Hopes for a GAA season look bleak, writes Kieran Cunningham, and no way can United miss Kane. This is Wayne Rooney's comments that Manchester United should build their team around Harry Kane.
I'd love for Harry Kane in the English papers this morning. The London Times here is inquiry into killer Harms Beaumont bid. Never a good look, really, is it? When you're like, oh, okay, this guy is a killer. No fan plan for Ryder Cup, and then transfer bans over deferrals. So clubs who are deferring wages in the crisis will face spending restrictions until players are paid the money they're owed, which means you won't be able to sign new players. They're planning for the Ryder Cup with no fans. Seth Wall, Chief Executive of the PGA Tour of America, said, "We've begun to talk about whether you could create some virtual fan experience. We're going to try to be as creative as we can. It's still to be determined, frankly, whether you could hold it without fans or not." I mean, I presume you can hold it without fans, right? Like if golf comes back and there's behind closed doors, obviously it's not, the environment won't be anywhere near as raucous and therefore as exciting for the Ryder Cup, but your commentators are going to have to fake it till they make it. And that's all that is, isn't it?
Yeah, like I think you and I would both agree that this is something that can definitely happen in sport, behind closed doors, and especially when it comes to professional games. I think golf is one example where if the conditions are right, that the sport itself shouldn't be overly affected. Of course, on the ground as an athlete, it will affect you. It will be different. It won't feel as fulfilling, especially if you are a victor. But you are getting paid to do this. This is your job. There will be prize money at the end of it. What are you going to do? Are you just going to shut up shop and not play and not earn your money? That's why I would have sympathy for GAA players if there was to be some sort of debate about them not wanting to go back out there, especially if there are some concerns, any bit of a concern about health and safety whatsoever. So I think it's different. I think with the professional sports people, there is an element here where it is your job. Now, I am saying that is not the case whatsoever if it is unsafe. But if we are fully sure that things are safe to proceed behind closed doors, then you go and you run your crust, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. And when it's safe to do so, right? So again, all the caveats are once it's safe to do so, and you said that. So, so next up, it's the UK Independent.
Yeah, the UK Independent leads with a picture here of Mitch Cronin, a tragic loss of life. Awful story, really. Mitch Cronin, the Queensland Cup's grand final captain, has died in what has been described as a training accident after family members reportedly found him in his Brisbane backyard pool on Friday. They're waiting to complete an autopsy, with Cronin suffering a suspected heart attack, only 27 years of age. Just one of the other stories here as well with rugby union. Tuilagi could finish career with Samoa. World Rugby chairman Sir Bill Beaumont is exploring a loophole that would allow players to appear for more than one country as he attempts to regain control in the governing body's close-fought election race. This is actually one of the more fascinating political battles in sport at the moment. Pichot versus Beaumont. They both seem to be using the "let's get radical" theme to actually try and draw attention onto themselves, to try and draw a few votes for them. And it looks like it's going to be quite a close-run thing, this battle between Beaumont and Pichot. And maybe the winner might actually be rugby in all of this, that a couple of the ideas that are floated may actually be good ideas. And the other story there in the UK Independent, Brighton Stadium becomes testing centre. Brighton Hove's Albion has been converted into the South Coast's biggest drive-in coronavirus testing centre.
The Daily Mail, back page of the Daily Mail this morning is global reach, and this is that same story you were just talking about there. The British and Irish Lions could tour the Americas as part of Pichot's vision to globalise the sport if he's elected World Rugby chairman. He wants them to go to new destinations as well as their usual ones. So people think I don't like tradition, but I speak to Lions players like Brian O'Driscoll, and it's a great product, Pichot said. Humble brag. I love it. There is still room for the Lions. It is a traditional thing, but we will look to make we can still add a modern look to it. They would be very popular in North and South America, but that's a conversation to have with the CEO of the Lions. And then Coleman's injury boosted his mental strength. Seamus Coleman talking about how Neil Taylor breaking his leg, ultimately something that he looked back on as an important phase in his life. I look back at the time as a massive learning phase for me, and it sounds mad, but it's probably something I wouldn't change. It challenged me as a person, and it's something I really enjoyed at the time, which sounds quite strange. I wonder, is Seamus Coleman going to become a manager? Okay, he would be a brilliant manager. From everything you've seen, every step of his career, there has been progress. He looks to me like he's somebody who is interested in lifelong learning and challenging himself, as he talks about here. Like the type of person who has had the experience of coming from Donegal to Sligo to going across and making it, and going out on loan and making it, and then coming back and making it again, and then coming back from that injury, and then being Ireland captain in the middle of it all. Like, of the profile of the players who we currently have, Seamus Coleman as manager is something that would be really fascinating, I think.
Not only can I see him being a manager, I can see exactly what sort of manager he can be. He is going to be a suit-wearing manager, for sure. You can see him in the suit doing his post-match interview, speaking in the same way he speaks now. He's a captain, he's a club legend and an international legend as well, I think, at this point. So he's just got all the characteristics to take him to a fairly decent level in management, you would have thought. There's been never any question of his commitment. So when it comes to putting in the work and actually working your way up from, say, a grassroots level, highly thought of at Everton, there could be like a low-down role for him there with underage teams at that club, you would have thought. There is a path there for him because he's got all the ability in the world to be a good manager, you would have thought. The Irish Sun is where I'm moving to next. Sand United is the back page headline. United gonna be the ones to get Wonder Kid. This is like obviously something that's been written about quite a bit for the last couple of months, that Manchester United are reportedly in pole position to sign Jadon Sancho. The first line from this is that United believe they have Borussia Dortmund super kid Jadon Sancho in the bag. So that's it. Signed, sealed, delivered. Jadon Sancho is a United player. Banging house music then is the other story here on the back page of the Irish Sun. This is Courtney House, the Aston Villa star, who's swapping his boots in for a microphone to raise funds for health workers. He's a promising R&B artist and rapper, and he's putting together a debut album under his stage name Courts. So he releases Worth It, that's the name of the album, through Spotify on Friday, and will give every penny to Britain's NHS. So fair play to him. And Kerry Gold, we pick our best Kingdom team of the last 20 years. That's in the Sun today. And Roman fight is paying off. Roman Abramovich's efforts to fight coronavirus have been the key to scoring a pay deal with the Chelsea players. The
back page of the Telegraph this morning is EFL facing 50 million TV bill if season is scrapped, and that picture there of a guy dressed up as a mountaineer is former rugby player Ed Jackson, who suffered a spinal cord injury 3 years ago in his parents' home before his amazing challenge, Why I'm Climbing Everest on a Staircase. And there's also a story there about the English FA taking action to counter a cruciate ligament ACL crisis afflicting women's game. So proper research gone into why women playing soccer are more prone to ACL injuries than others.
The Guardian this morning leads with that PGA story, as you've mentioned, swinging for 1 million COVID-19 test kits to complete season. Tour events backed for key role within Trump's plans for a return to normality in the US. And also Silverstone prepares to host doubleheader on Formula One's return. They say they'll host double races if they have to, back-to-back races if life gets back to normality in the Formula One sphere. So that's going to be something that is definitely going to be a theme of these first few months of dipping the toe back into the water of live sport, is that we will have an unbelievable saturation, like double Six Nations, double Silverstone Grand Prix. Like there's going to be a lot of money spinning being done in those first couple of months, and there's going to be a lot of repetition and saturation, I think it's fair to say.
How would the PGA Tour actually work it? Why are they ordering 1 million kits?
Well, I don't know where they're getting the number for 1 million kits, but I do know that the number is, 500, 600 people on course in every event. So it would be from the 11th of June all the way up to, the 7th of September, 14 tournaments. So, 7 to 800 personnel is the line from Eoin Murray in his piece, needed on site, and 14 tournaments. So is that 800 multiplied by 14 plus a hell of a lot of extra ones to swab every single day as well? That's possibly it. So, you have to test everybody, obviously. It is mentioned in the piece that if somebody does test positive, they will be asked to self-quarantine for 14 days. So I'm not sure. There's been no mention that if somebody tests positive, the whole thing is shut down. So I presume that within their plan is social distancing as well, and that if somebody has it, it doesn't actually matter. I don't know. It does seem ridiculously unwise at the moment to be considering this and to run 14 tournaments up till the 7th of September. This is not starting on the 7th of September. This is 14 tournaments up until 7th of September. It seems ludicrous, really, at first look. I think down the line, if testing kits are readily available and it is putting no stress whatsoever on the health service, of course it's a sensible thing to do. But right now, if there's a strain on testing kits, it seems ridiculous. Trump last week was saying that he's sick of watching baseball games that are 14 years old. And that is realistically a factor in all of this, that you do have the president who actually wants to have his golf back and may be able to give a helping hand to actually getting testing kits in. WWE has been seen as an essential service in Florida. The UFC wants to fight islands, and now we have the PGA Tour looking for 1 million test kits. So we're going to live in a world where it's going to be the UFC, WWE and golf for a prolonged period of time, it seems. Donald Trump is going to be a happy man.
Right, let's move on. 36 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTB AM. On Friday, it was announced that the GAA's Special Remote Congress had voted to allow the GAA's 16-member management committee to declare that special emergency circumstances exist which make it impractical to conduct the affairs of the association in accordance with the rules, essentially giving the GAA some flexibility to respond quickly to the evolving crisis. And I'm glad to say Alan Milton, the GAA Director of Communications, is with us this morning to tease out exactly what this means. Alan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, Jerry. All good. Slightly surreal, but getting on with it like everybody else. Missing sport badly.
Yeah, I think we all are, definitely. How did Friday's special Congress, what were the practicalities that come out of it? How will it actually manifest itself into the future?
Well, in essence, the management committee of the GAA will now be authorised to maintain and to change structures of the competitions if it's a requirement going forward, whereas previously the GAA would have had to convene a special Congress to do that, or a Congress arrangement, and that just wasn't deemed practical in this day and age. Even Central Council, which is a far bigger group, so there would have been there could be upwards of 40 to 50 people on a Central Council call. So to discuss the minutiae of different championship structures would be very, very difficult over this type of technology. It's simple, practical stuff like people speaking over each other, or how you would facilitate the whole thing poses lots of challenges. So the management committee is a far smaller and far more compact group, and they will now have the authority to study things and to work crucially with CCCC, who make all of the GAA fixtures.
Okay. In terms of the realistic possibility of us seeing some action on the GAA field this year, there was certainly a lot of defeatist talk from people over the course of the weekend, I think in response to Minister Simon Harris saying that he doesn't see any mass gatherings happening in 2020. What's the organisation actually feeling about this? Are you hopeful that there will be some action on the field of play this year?
I'm certainly hopeful. I think you're right, the weekend represented something of a water change if those sentiments are to ring true. To the best of my knowledge, what we heard is not official government policy as of yet, and we'd expect it to be communicated differently if it becomes official government policy. Having said that, the Minister for Health has a responsibility to citizens to outline what he sees are the threats and the realities that all citizens of Ireland have to face, not just sporting people. I think it's really important to make that point, Ger, that we all get caught up in the minutiae of sport, but there's people with far bigger issues at hand, frontline workers and people with sick people and their families. So I think there's an element of perspective required. I think most people who have watched this and followed the story would accept that club activity is far likelier to return earlier, and that's very obvious as to why that might be in terms of smaller crowds turning up to watch games. Although I did joke to somebody over the weekend, if there was a Junior B game on here in my club, there'd be 500 people at it in the morning. But I think the inter-county game is going to necessitate a very different conversation. And it's not just Gaelic games, it's sport. And it's not just sport in Ireland, it's global sport.
Yeah, totally. And I think we're all completely open to those conversations. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about what the scenario planning is at the moment? And I'm not asking you to fly kites, but just like, what are the potential scenarios on the table? Is playing behind closed doors something that will be thought about? What would that involve? Is it worthwhile doing that? Is it possible that we don't have All-Ireland Championships, but that we have some other competitions played this year? The point you make about 500 people showing up for a Junior B game, like, we're all, notwithstanding the context, but we are all dying to see something happen. So if anything can be organised, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, well, I think our scenario planning was based on two different things. The first one was the amount of time that we might have to play competitions, and the second one was what format they would have to take, dependent on the time that we would have. So you would take the finals and work backwards to see how many weekends you would have. And I think it's easy to draw the conclusion that you wouldn't be able to facilitate round-robin group stages at quarter-final in football, or round-robin group stages in Munster and Leinster championships for hurling. So in that scenario, you're looking at two potential models, in my view. The first one was the traditional backdoor system that we had, or Plan B, possibly a straight knockout. But I can honestly say that the idea of playing games behind closed doors has not been seriously considered at this stage, Ger, and I think it's a profound decision for the GAA to take, if it has to take it. But I think it will only really come into sharp focus if it means no championship at all, or a championship behind closed doors. And of course, as has been alluded to by some of the commentary this morning, I think it's a very, very different conversation to be had with our players if that was an ask of them. And, it may be an unfair ask depending on amateurs, sports people, depending on what their personal circumstances are.
100%, I think, and that's the part of this that is the great unknown, is like what players might actually be available. And again, so we had Professor Luke O'Neill on last week, and he actually was quite positive about the possibility of certainly local sport taking part again, where if you had the ban on groups of less than 100 meeting, then you could actually play matches. You might not be able to have supporters at matches, but you'd be able to at least play matches off. You'd at least be able to have training, and you'd be able to have competitive matches within training. And that's like the beginning of some sense of normality returning, but that's quite far away from having crowds and grounds. Is there a possibility of social distancing within bigger stadiums where it might actually be fairly easy to maintain social distance, but you just cap crowds in Páirc Uí Chaoimh or in Croke Park, for example? Is that something that's been thought about?
It hasn't been considered in any serious way, but I think it's something that you'd have to engage experts on. I think terracing would be a challenge there, Ger, because it might be hard to police. I think practicing that in a stand situation might be something that's more realistic. But again, I'd be misleading you if I was to say that we've sat down and we've marked this out in any meaningful way. What we did last week was we announced that we couldn't see any inter-county games before the start of July. That means we've a 12-week window to now start looking at the things that you've just put to me. And I think everyone is really, really looking for live sport, and we'd all love to have a championship to look forward to. But it has to be done in the right way and has to be approached in the right way. And as things stand at the moment, from some of the herd immunity stories that we've read this morning, I think we're still some distance away from being able to engage in that realistically. One story I picked up in recent weeks was the return to training of the Bayern Munich soccer players, and albeit it's in a professional setting, but the fact that the German authorities clusters, there are glimmers of hope out there, but how that might transfer or manifest itself into an amateur sporting setting is different.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that actually, Alan, that there, as the weeks and months go by, there almost might be a reference point from either the Premier League or, as you say, the Bundesliga there. Have you started to think at all exactly how a behind closed doors situation would operate for, say, inter-county teams? Like, there just comes with a huge amount of complications. For my opinion, it's a situation where you think about the healthline workers, the people in the front line of the healthcare, and like those who are playing with inter-county teams and how they actually manage to kind of balance both things within their life. It just seems like an impossibility that while it will be a handy reference point if the Premier League gets back up and running in the next couple of weeks, it's not something that can just fit an amateur organisation.
No, we haven't considered it in any meaningful way on, but I'll give you my own personal view on it. I think you could ask club players at certain levels to come and play club games without having to use dressing rooms. I'm not sure if you could ask inter-county players who train and prepare as well as they do to not enter a team scenario where 30 or 40 or 50 people are milling around the dressing room. And that's one distinct difference between inter-county and club. Even senior club, you could ask, well, hang on a second, we can't prepare properly if we can't be in a dressing room before and at halftime at a game. I just can't. I think there'll be real difficulties at inter-county level, how you'd expect people to come together, whether it be at training or whether it be on a match day, and to not share facilities in terms of planning and pre-prep and all the rest of it that goes with inter-county, which is their elite level of Gaelic games. So, there are real difficulties there. Now, whether or not this situation changes over the next 6 to 8 weeks, there's a lot being said about the need for a vaccine. I'm not a medical expert, but to me, those timeframes appear really short, and unless something drastic is going to happen, things look very, very challenging.
The other question I have, Alan, as well, is just how much of a financial hit this would take to the GAA. So obviously, the obvious situation is that if there's not people coming through the turnstiles, it's going to take a big financial hit, no question about that. And that, unfortunately, looks very, very likely this year. On the other side of things, then, if there are no games to be televised, for example, how much of a hit will that then take for the GAA? It is almost like another double whammy of financial hits that the GAA might have to take. Could it be a serious situation where you're looking to kind of claw back some of the money with extra competition next year, perhaps?
Well, that's not. Next year hasn't even entered the phrase. What we've done in that scenario is, and I think the Director General was out in front already and said that the season without games could cost the GAA 60 million euros. And we don't exist to make money, but like everybody else, you have to pay your bills. And we have a large network of people employed around the country promoting Gaelic games at grassroots level, and they'll be uppermost in our thoughts as well. I'd have to say the broadcasters and the sponsors up to this point have been hugely supportive and very understanding, and I think there's been a real sense of everybody being in this together. But there will come a time if we have no games to promote. Sponsors and partners can't work with us to promote those games and raise the awareness of games, and indeed broadcasters can't broadcast them. You're looking at a very, very grave scenario, because without games, we don't have anything else. It's what we do. It's games and culture. And while it's not as serious as what's going on out there, it's very, very serious to everybody who's involved with the GAA and who's employed by the GAA. So there's scenarios that are, I seriously hope we don't have to comprehend, but we're duty bound to ensure that we prepare for them in case they do arise. As for next year on, it's just too far off at this stage. I think, we're in April. I think in the next 8 to 12 weeks, as we start to motor towards mid-July, if things begin to crystallise, I think a conversation about the possibility of having something to spill over into 2021 could feature in that conversation. The GAA, as you're probably aware, historically has a good track record in finishing championships late when it had to do so. I'm glad to say that was a long, long time ago, but I'm sure if we have to be flexible and we have to be creative in getting competitions played, no matter how we do it, we'll definitely look at that in earnest.
In fairness, it's not that long ago that we used to have the Winter League finishing in spring, so it wouldn't be that big a step for all of us to have a competition that started in Q4 this year and that rolled over and maybe finished on Paddy's Day or whatever, if that was a scenario. So, Alan, just to recap, in case anybody's just joining us, it's more likely that we'll have club games restarting first, assuming that it's safe to do so, right? And assuming that the government give the say so. What kind of is there any time frame where you're saying, okay, the 2020 inter-county season won't happen, or will you actually give yourselves until October, November, December? If something had to start at that point and it would technically be the 2020 season, would you do that?
I think 2020 as a season will be, we'll leave it as late as we possibly could to try and play it. As you said, if it had to spill over into 2021, the CCCC will look at that, I'm sure. There has to be a twin approach to this, because you've got to remember, you've referenced the time when we used to have league games in the winter. I don't think the club championships at provincial or national level were as important. All of those things would have to come into the but the club scene is just extremely, extremely important, because while the inter-county game will affect about 1,900 players, I think if we could bring back the rhythm of life that many people's lives are lived through the rhythm of sport, if we could bring that back to every town and village in Ireland, I think it would have a profound effect. Of course, that won't be our call, but as soon as the authorities give us the green light to start looking at that, I'm no doubt the county boards will spring into life, and we'll have plans ready. Whether or not the counties themselves have to look at doing straight knockout competitions is another thing we could deliberate on. That will be up to them. But all I'd say, Jared, at this stage is that the GAA will try to be as flexible as it possibly can, both at county and at national level, to do everything that's possible to get as many games played that we can in this calendar year. These are unprecedented times, and those of us who lived through the foot and mouth situation would have thought it had serious impact on our schedules, but nothing we've ever encountered compared to this.
One last thing, obviously, clubs around the country have been very heavily involved in getting out and helping the elderly who are cocooning. It's been a hallmark, really, of the organisation since it started 5-6 weeks ago, that actually the small units within GAA clubs were very quick to respond to that. And I guess it must be a sense of immense pride to everybody involved from Croke Park that has actually been the case.
Yeah, it's been really, really heartening. You know, we talk about community a lot, and some people might question it sometimes, but it's really, the GAA is built on it. And I know we set up the Club Together scheme with Musgraves, which involves Centra and Super Value stores. But I know if we hadn't have done that, this would have happened organically anyway, because it's happening everywhere. Our community and health manager, Colin Regan, the former Leitrim footballer, is actually doing a survey at the moment with our county boards just to try and help us get a handle on the scale and the amount of activity that's going out there. And I just think it's fantastic that our clubs have stepped up to the plate in the way they have. It doesn't surprise me. It happens all the time. But I think at a time like this, when the nation needs it, and it's not just the GAA, Jared, some of the fantastic organisations out there that have pressed pause on sport and diverted their energies into helping the country keep moving in a very different way. I think it's been very, very, it's heartening to see this, and I think people are having connections, and some people have had reboots and resets in their lives, and I hope these positive traits carry over into normal life when things return to normality, whatever that normality might look like whenever it happens.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something different. Alan, thanks for joining us this morning. Really.
Anytime, Ger.
Really glad you took the time for us. Thank you. That's Alan Milton there, the GAA's Director of Communications, giving us some thoughts on the very latest situation there. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, you can use the hashtag OTB AM, or you can always get us 0879 180 180. Now, for the past week or so, on Off the Ball, we've been talking to sports people the length and breadth of the country and simply asking, how's the head? We're hearing how they're coping during this crisis, what they're doing to keep their mental health in order, and find out what advice they found useful from their sporting careers that has served them well during this stressful time. We'd love to hear how you're getting on, what's keeping you sane, what's got you through the last few weeks. You can WhatsApp Off the Ball on 0879 180 180 or use the hashtag how's the head. This morning we're catching up with Westmeath star Boyd Usea. Here he is.
Being home isolation isn't too bad. It's grand. You know, it's hard to get used to it for a while, but, you know, after a couple of weeks now, it's been, you know, you kind of get the hang of it. You kind of get in a little bit of a routine, you know, you have to try kind of make your own routine. But at the moment, it's grand. You know, you're trying to keep safe, trying to make sure everyone else is keeping safe as well. So, yeah, all's good. It's handy in the way that I live in a little town, Moat. So, you know, everything's close by. I have a rugby pitch across the road where I can go do my kicking or running, and you know I have a big garden here as well, so I can do my own fitness work at home, and I can do it inside as well. And you know, obviously it is a big challenge to, you know, to get out there and to do it, you know, get the motivation to do that kind of stuff when no one's kind of over you, you're not meeting up with different people to do it, but you know, you kind of have a goal, you have to kind of set yourself and then, you know, get that done as well. I'm way better at training with a group. I find it really, really difficult to, you know, get the motivation to do it. But, you know, luckily we have kind of group chats and everyone's kind of putting in what they're doing. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a motivation to get out and do it yourself. And, you know, it's a bit of a competition thing going on as well. So everyone's kind of, you know, everyone's flat out doing their own thing, trying to keep fit. Yeah, that's the main thing. You know, we have our days off when we're not training, which is you're by yourself anyway. But the main thing is when you are training, you're with a big group and everyone's kind of, it's all about the banter and, you know, having the crack with the lads. I'd say that's probably the main thing. You know, training, obviously, is taken very serious. You're in your own zone. You're flat out doing your own thing when you're there. But, you know, after that, you're having the crack with the lads and you're meeting up. And, you know, even without training, you all meet up, have a coffee. You know, and that ends, they're your best friends as well in that kind of scenario. So, you know, it's kind of now you're not meeting up with your best friends, even though you're not training, you're still not doing anything. So, you know, that's probably the tough part. Yeah, that's the thing. We're all flat out training. I say every single county is doing the same thing. They're all training, but no one really knows whether we're going to be playing at all this year or, you know, if anything's going to be happening. But at the moment, you know, we're obviously kind of thinking a bit positive, thinking hopefully in the next, you know, we have this 3 weeks, but hopefully maybe another month, maybe we might be back out even training or kicking around the ball. Maybe not games yet, but we're still hoping anyway. It's definitely hard. It's definitely hard to know because no one knows what's happening. So it's hard to know whether, you know, football is that much importance in circumstances at the moment. You know, if they say, you know, we can't go back playing ball, it's not a big deal, you know. I wouldn't say it's a big issue. You know, the issue is really to kind of to make sure everyone's safe enough to go outside the door to meet up with people. I don't think football at the moment is the most important thing that could happen. Jeez. Watching a lot of Netflix. You know, I hate running on road, but I'm doing a lot of running on road. I have a little neighbour beside me. We always go out and kick around the ball with him. At the moment, I'm not really doing much at the moment, you know, just trying to keep sane in the house, you know, cleaning a good bit. You know, it's only me and the mother, so she's kind of has me doing a lot in the house, but at the moment, not doing much. I'm actually watching, it's not on Netflix, but I'm watching this show called Sopranos. It's like a mob thing, so it's actually pretty good. It's one of those shows where, you know, you watch episodes after episodes and the time just flies by.
That's How's the Heads. A good recommendation there at the end from Bodie Sayed, the Westmeath Gaelic footballer, for this thing called The Sopranos. You should check it out. You should check it out. Owen, you should check it out. I don't know if Owen's there at the moment. You are there, yeah.
I am there. Yeah. I'm always here.
You still haven't checked out The Sopranos. I can't believe it.
No, I have. I have, of course. I think I've watched the first season about 5 times at this point. I always just pick it at a busy time in my life and end up getting distracted by other things.
Like the time of the pandemic when you accidentally watch loads of other things instead of The Sopranos. It's just coming up to 9 o'clock this morning. It's 8:57 for you. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. Plenty more to come. Diarmuid, Lyng and Liam Griffin are going to join us to carve Wexford's Mt Rushmore. We'll ask them for the specific location of it. A bit of debate about that and where exactly it should be. Someone was suggesting Vinegar Hill. Diarmuid was like, no, we want a mountain, not a hill. We're going to continue the conversation about the future of sport in 2020 as well. And ahead of the season 5 finale of Better Call Saul, we're discussing that before 10 o'clock as well. We're back with Mt Rushmore after this.
We do Johnny Sexton as well. We've sort of played Johnny Sexton as a 14-year-old sort of brat who's always on Fortnite and there's a big head on him because he just wants to be left alone. Shut up, will you? And it's like Johnny's just there like, shut up, old man. And everybody's an old man. Just leave me alone and let me take the kick. And he's like, Johnny, I just want to, just take the kick. Stop looking at me. I can't do it when you look at me, old man. So we kind of play Johnny as...
Hope he takes it the right way.
You know, I play Brian O'Driscoll as, a guy who likes to use polysyllabic words like rambunctious and remonstrating with the referee. And every sentence that he says is usually sponsored by a large major corporation like Zanussi or, Harvey Norman GoPros. So, and sorry, I'm getting a bit touchy there with off the ball there. I'm getting sailing a bit close to the wind there, John.
Yeah, he's in the stable.
Brian Kerr is brilliant, but Brian is a visual as well because Brian has this, the smiley eyes. You know what I mean? Brian kind of has the eyes, the slitty eyes. They're very smiley, And I always thought that he was kind of a human embodiment of kind of a football version of Aslan, These are the hands of a tired man.
Brilliant voice on him.
He's on later on as well, actually, on our World Cup series. He's a great man.
He is an intelligent fella, loves music and a liver of life. But I mean, then sometimes we bastardize characters. We turn a character from something that it is into something that it isn't. So you bend characters slightly.
So I've always played Robbie Keane as kind of a hoodlum. This fella who's on the run from the law, and he's always looking around going, the cops are going to get me, head down.
So we play Robbie like a guy who's on the run.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
They had one more day to rest. We were really in trouble to build the team.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
Oh, sweaty palms. Of course, you guys know what it's like, but that was nervy, yeah.
The OTB Brief, online every morning from 7 a.m. on offtheball.com, the Go Loud app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
OTB AM.
Right, it is 9 o'clock. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Gilroy, Eoin, Sheahan with you every morning. We're here from 7:30 until 10 for the duration of our lockdown. And one of the things that we're doing is we're going county by county, and we're asking some people we respect and love to come forth and tell us who should be on that county's sporting Mt Rushmore. No better person than Diarmuid Lyng to do Wexford's for us. We're going to hear from Liam Griffin in a couple of minutes' time as well. But Diarmuid, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Jar. How's it going?
A lot of people haven't slept very well the night before they've been asked to come on and do this. You slept like a baby, I hear.
Jar, I wish I could say that. And I didn't sleep like my baby either, because the two of us were up for half the night.
Oh, no.
So I couldn't let go of, do you know, when you're down and you're on social media, it's an amazing thing that happens. When I was on Twitter and I was responding and thinking and talking to people, and nothing was coming clearly, and then I was lying in bed and all of this poetic beauty started coming out of me about Wexford people, and it reminded me when I was on Twitter talking about it. It gets into this like, no, it should be him. No, it should be him. And I had listened to Nathan talking about how the Mayo he'd be savaged for who he left off. And I realised it's just an absolute celebration of the people, of the great sporting people of Wexford. And it's a joy to do it, and a joy to get a chance to celebrate some of those players. So once that dawned on me, shortly before dawn, I rested a little bit easier for the last couple of hours.
That's class. So it was kind of just before the dawn, when it's always darkest, a vision comes to you and you're like, I'm going to have the crack.
Well, I mean, you know, you could end up singing or anything. I just thought, here, just enjoy it. Yeah, who are they? Who are the great players? Like, what do they represent? The rules, like, what are the rules for a start? I mean, once Adrian picked Paddy O'Shea, the rules went out the window as far as I'm concerned. I think we just get a chance to look at some of the people who represented us, you know, like, is there a Wexfordness in a way, and who are the people who represented that? So that's kind of what I was thinking about. Achievement, medals, that all comes into it. Like, it's there's so many influences in it, but it was it was quite a joy in the end, and so many different views from so many different people as well, that it was it was good to get that too.
So when you were a kid, what were the names, the local names? Because like in our house, we were big Wexford hurling fans, and the Rackards would have got mentioned, but Tony Doran would have been one of the archetypal hurlers of my youth, where I would have heard my dad when we were commentating in the back garden, or even my ma talking about, you know, just a force of nature, and somebody who was able to hold his own against all of the other teams around the country. And for whatever reason, Tony Doran was one of the absolute legends. I actually remember being held up to meet him one time, and you know, one of those times when your hand disappears into the hand of somebody else, which obviously is never going to happen again. But like, I remember Tony Doran's a man with big hands.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you have that, because you're a little bit older than I am, Ger, and I don't have that. And I realised that at about 4 o'clock this morning. I think I was like, Jeannie Mac, I don't even have Tony Doran in there. And I think it's because, like, I mean, I came up in the 80s, and George was really was that figure for me in the 80s. And when you talked about going back before that, you skipped the 70s and went straight to the 50s. Went straight, I suppose 68 was probably a big thing, but you went straight to the 50s and to Nicky Rackard and the Rackards. They were the archetypal figure, as you talk about. Like, Nicky Rackard was Cuchullin's son, like, you know, that goes straight back into, once upon a time. Like, he was a story. He was barely a living creature to me. He was like just a legend, somebody who walked up to Eoin Macha throwing a ball, a spear, and a shield ahead of him and catching it on the way. Like, that's who Nicky Rackard was. So he was who we grew up with, the mythical figure. But in the very real moment of it, I would say George was probably he was the real embodiment of it.
I mean, you've obviously got a very intense personal relationship with George O'Connor as well. That obviously, and this is your list, right? So there's that actually adds to. Are you putting George O'Connor on your Mt Rushmore?
I mean, for the moustache he rocked in the 80s, I feel like he should definitely get on it for that alone. But you know, I'm not, because Nicky Rackard has to go on it. Nicky Rackard just has to go on it. Right? He's a man mountain himself anyway. So Nicky Rackard, and I suppose George is similar. And it is my list, so I can just decide for myself. But I feel you have to represent the great sporting variety that we've had in some way. But Nicky Rackard, I mean, I wrote down some of the things. 17 years he played for. In 54. In the Leinster final, he scored 5-5. He went down in the Ireland semi-final and scored 7-7. I mean, who scores 7-7 in a game of hurling? Like,
I didn't know this.
7-7. Yeah, unbelievable stuff. So, I mean, 2 All-Irelands, 4 Leinsters, 1 league, and 1 Leinster football championship as well. So Nicky Rackard kind of is facing south. He's facing east on Mt Rushmore. The sun is going to rise on Nicky Rackard's face because the sun rose on Wexford hurling through Nicky Rackard. So he's sorted, I think. He's like, and I mean, you're talking about like Nick O'Donnell, Bobby Rackard, Art Foley, all of these greats from that team. Jim English, Damien Fitzhenry up to modern day, George O'Connor, Tony Dorn. So many other players, but I do feel you have to represent the variety. So I went with Nicky Rackard as a stonewall cert. He was my chorus Staunton as Nathan had.
Okay, well, can we talk about some of George's teammates then? Because Damien Fitzhenry is obviously somebody who was an absolute sensation and.
Unbelievable, Ger. Unbelievable. Jeannie Mac to have trained with Damien Fitzhenry. My God, the stuff that man could do in goal was just phenomenal. Like, people debate it, you know, it was a great generation of goalkeepers, Davy Fitzgerald and Brendan, like Don Logue. There was great goalkeepers, but Damien Fitzhenry to me was like, I have an image actually. Shefflin ran through on goal in the 2007 Leinster final, I think, and I was marking him, and he had just eluded me. He was gone 50 yards away before I even knew that he wasn't right beside me. And my only job was to know where he was, like, and he was gone. I didn't know where he was. And I turned around, he was in 10 yards away from Fitzy. So I was sprinting back in. The ball went in. He caught it. He turned to hit it. I couldn't do anything. I was so far away. So I tried to slide tackle him and kick him as hard as I could at the same time to put him off and swipe the hurl across him as well, all in one movement, which I actually succeeded in doing. And as I was doing that, he struck the ball and I turned around to see the net shaking, I thought. And I just have this image of Fitzhenry suspended about a foot above the ground the whole way across the goal, the hurl outstretched and the ball just tipping the very, very corner of it. And I'd say we were 8 yards away from goal and Shefflin had a full belt on it. Fitzhenry was unbelievable.
I'd forgotten that you actually were teammates of his at the end of his career. He played for so long as well. He's another one who played for 15, 16 years.
Yeah, I played with Fitzy for 4 or 5 years, I'd say, Jar. I used to love playing with Fitzy, particularly when I was wing back, because he'd put the ball in your hand from anywhere. He just hit the ball like a bullet. Now, you wouldn't want to be with him at training. You'd be there in November and December at training, and you'd be doing the warm-up before the game, and everybody else would be kind of tapping back and forth. And Fitzy, you'd be driving the ball through you, and your hands would be Baltic cold, and your feet, the ball be hitting your bones, it wouldn't even be hitting your skin. And but Fitzy, there was no let up in Fitzy. He was a link back to the likes of George. He was a link back to fellas who were like, that's how they carried on a regular basis. Like they played league hurling in the winter. Like they were tough men. Like, and he was kind of telling the young upstart townie, this is how it's done. You know, you get tough early, and it was a good lesson.
Right, well, I'm going to ask you in a minute whether or not he's going to make it, but I'm delighted to say we've got Liam Griffin on the line with us this morning as well. Liam, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning, folks. How are you?
Well, I should tell you where Diarmuid started, right? He says that Nicky Rackard is going to be east-facing, the sun is going to rise, and the first thing that the sun will pick on Wexford's Mt Rushmore is the face of Nicky Rackard every day, because the sun rose in Wexford hurling when Nicky Rackard rose, and so he is an unimpeachable on Wexford's Mt Rushmore. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I'd agree with he should be in the top of one of the top people on hurling in Mt Rushmore as well, because don't forget where he came from. He came from a county that was not strong in hurling, that was trying to emerge. And he went to Kieran's in Kilkenny, and in fairness, he learned a lot of his hurling at Kieran's. And, you know, he led Wexford when we hadn't fields of barley. I can tell you we had fairly barren fields in hurling. And he won a Leinster medal in 1940, centre field, playing for Wexford junior. And, he carried on through a lot of thick and thin and through a lot of heartaches with Wexford, and eventually put his flag on top of the mountain for us. And his two brothers as well in the same house came out with him, and the two of them wound up in the team of the century, except to drop Nicky, which is a disgrace later on off the team of the century, which was a crazy thing to happen. But however, we took the insult, and I suppose the family did as well. And that's it. But he's the main man, and he was the man who drove Wexford, and he's the man who inspired me, and that team of the 50s would have inspired me as well. So, number one for sure in County Wexford.
Lovely story, Liam. It was Billy wrote No Hurling at the Dairy Door, a beautiful book about their life growing up, and he said that Nicky Rackard came in one morning, and in on the side of one of the barn buildings into the cement was carved, or into the stone was carved, JK 98. I mean John Kelly. 98. And so he put Nicky Rackard 56 beside it, and that's that links straight back to 1798, which is something we definitely value that in Wexford, you know.
Well, and Kelly, the boy from Killam, was supposed to be born in that house, in fairness. But the other thing about it is this, that when he went to Kieran's, he was starring for Kieran's, and his photograph appeared on one of the national papers. But Bobby and Billy were hurling out in the yard, and the mother called him in and put the Independent down in front of them, or whatever paper it was, and showed him Nicky's photograph with great pride, because that would be very unusual. And the two boys then, that's his two brothers who he seriously influenced, and they really wanted to be like that as well. So, you brought three big men, over 6'2", 6'3", out of the same house. But the man that led him out of that house was Nicky Rackard, and therefore led the rest of the people as well to follow him from Rathnewer and Clabon and all the various areas. So, without a question, he has to go there as number one.
Go on, sorry.
Sorry, Liam. What was the thought process behind not including Nicky Rackard in that team of the Millennium? Was it a complete aberration? Like, what was it met with outrage at the time?
No, it was a GAA 3-card trick. Look, it took two people off the team this century who'd never played a game. But you can imagine the insult that was. And Nicky Rackard was taken off. Now, Nicky Rackard, you can say what you like about Christy Ring, and he was an absolutely magnificent hurler. I'm not taking from him. I'm not taking from any of the great Kilkenny players, Lowry Marr or anybody else. But where Nicky Rackard had come from, it's absolutely an aberration to think they could take him off of that. And I remember being incensed when I saw it, to be honest. But look at, that's the way it works, and that's what happened, and we move on. That's it. But we know where he is, and we know where he came from, and we know what he did, and that's all that matters to me and to the people of Wexford, I imagine.
Can you tell us about what kind of a player he was? Because obviously most of us never actually got the opportunity to see him. So, go on.
I did see him. I saw him at the very end of his days, and I was lucky to be on a Wexford team one time that he was involved with, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and that was like the hand of God touching you. You know what I mean? He was just, look, he was a fantastic man. Like, his presence was just unbelievable. To see him standing in a dressing room, like, you wouldn't be worried about going out, you'd be just looking at him. That's a fact. He was a gentleman as well. Now, he had his problems when he wasn't a gentleman, when he drink taken, like most people, like a lot of people. And that was such a tragedy. And he died as a young man. And that was so tragic that he should die as a young man. But I saw him playing a game against Kilkenny. I don't know what kind of a game it was. I'm not even sure. It was in Belfield and Enniscorthy. And Wexford were losing by about, I think it was 5 or 6 points. And he got 3 goals in about the last, I don't know. I just can't recall. But I remember him just going out to the middle of the field and getting the ball and coming down the middle and everybody hopping off him. You know, just that time, full-backs hadn't the great silken skills and they weren't deft, crafty little hurlers. They'd meet you up and hop off you, which we all learned to take in our time. But just he stood up like a I don't know, he was a giant of a man, and that's it. And Cú Chulainn son, that song that's written about him, a poem that Tom Williams wrote, has to be one of the most beautiful GAA poems of all time. And his name is not even mentioned. We saw you on September fields and lightning was the drive. You were the one, Cú Chulainn son, in 1955.
Oh,
and he was. And he was.
Liam, do you remember in the 70s, because I was reading about it last night, and it said it was talking about how when he began to talk about it maybe a little bit more openly, the alcoholism and the effect that had on his life, and that it was a kind of a pioneering thing at the time, that it wasn't something that was done in Irish society. Now, I don't remember, but a taboo, he broke a taboo, like that he had that greater leadership than just on the field.
He came out and he said it himself. But, you know, that time everything was pushed under the closet, I'm sure. But the great thing about him, you know, that he was an inspiration after that. And he went on to do great work with alcoholics and so forth. But I'm just going to say this, and I'm not saying this to be smart. I'm saying this because I mean it so sincerely. After the Ireland final, when we won it, we put the cup in the middle of the floor, and the next morning after the All-Ireland. And my view was he'd such an influence on me and what his life was. We got her stood around the cup and said a few prayers as well, and I'm not ashamed to say that, I can tell you. And I said, and I meant it because I'd thought about it from the previous months and weeks before if we ever did, that if any one of you become an alcoholic, like Nicky Rackard, he was one of the greatest things. Hero worship is dangerous. And from here out this story, your lives will change forever. And Nicky's life was spoiled by the hero worship that he achieved. And that's such an unintended consequence, but that's the truth, and that's what happens. And that's what happened, Nicky.
He went public in a series of interviews with the Irish press. We were just, I think the Wexford People actually republished them recently enough, and it was fascinating stuff. And Diarmuid, as you say, nobody really spoke about it at the time, but he ended up working with Alcoholics Anonymous and travelling the country. And so, you know, obviously did feel like he was giving back, and again, using his fame and his hero worship as something to help people to try and shake the plague that alcoholism is in so many people's lives. Before you joined us, Liam, Diarmuid was talking about Damien Fitzhenry, and I don't know, Diarmuid, are you going to put Damien Fitzhenry, is he next on your list, or is there somebody from that 96 team on your list?
No. Well, I couldn't. Damien Fitzhenry was, I suppose, the greatest goalkeeper I ever saw, and I had a cousin who played in goal for Wexford, a brilliant goalkeeper before Damien, Pat Nolan from Oilgate, and he won a couple of All-Ireland medals and played in 4 or 5 All-Ireland finals. He was a magnificent goalkeeper as well, and he wasn't very flamboyant. But Damien Fitzhenry, like what can you say about Damien Fitzhenry? I think I said something about him one time, that Damien Fitzhenry had such a mental fortitude and strength. Damien Fitzhenry believed completely in himself. And I said about him before, and I repeat it, that he often sat in bed at night time even wondering why any goal got by him. And that's not an arrogance. I don't think Fitzy ever believed that he wasn't giving out the damn to himself afterwards for letting in any goal. That never mind some spectacular saves. Any goal. He wouldn't allow any goal to go in there. David Welch of the Sunday Times was down with us in before 1995, I think it was. And we had Damien lined up, but we had done a new kind of goalkeeping drills whereby we called numbers, and there was we line guys across in front of the goal coming from every side, and you were calling the number. Now, I'm telling you, I wouldn't have stood in the goal for it, because if you didn't get the number call right, and that was good for his mental dexterity as well, if you didn't get your numbers right, and we could call 1, 11, 12, 4, 6, coming at him in bullets. And I'm telling you, David Welch came to me and said, "Holy God, I never saw anything like that," and he wrote about it afterwards. And that's what he was like. He was just an incredible goalkeeper, and no big show about the saves he made. No big show, and he was able to forget something. If it went into the back of the net, he had the ability to just leave it behind him and just get on with it, and he was just magnificent. I went down to him, this is funny, I went down to him at the Ireland semi-final or something, and I don't know what I said, I was talking about the puck out, and they said something, he said to me, no, maybe it was Leinster's final line, something like, just a big crowd, isn't there? I don't know, and I just like, he's in a big field somewhere on his own, just past the column, big crowd, isn't it? Just so the man was so in the moment, unbelievable. I would think he's the greatest goalkeeper I ever saw, and I saw Ali as well, and I saw a lot of great goalkeepers, but he's the number one for me as well on the goalkeeping side. Have to be.
Yeah, it's not. I don't have him, Ger, because it's not hurling only Mt Rushmore. Unfortunately, he definitely would. I'd have to give a couple of honourable mentions. I mean, Sean O'Kennedy, before my time, don't know anything really about the man, but they won 4 All-Irelands back-to-back football, and he captained 3 of them, so he's obviously a pretty serious contender. Kate Kelly, 9 Camogie, 9 All-Stars, 4 All-Irelands. I mean, changed the way Camogie, when Camogie was going through its biggest change, she moved, she was ahead of that change all the time. Phenomenal Camogie player. Definitely the best I've seen. But the second one for me is moving over to football, and again the impact on people and the way the game is played, and walking away from grounds, and sincerely meaning this, walking away from grounds. Wexford Park one day in particular, after a game against, I think maybe Offaly, the Meath game up in Carlow, Galway 4-4, Matty Ford. Sometimes I just felt grateful walking out of a stadium that I actually got to witness him doing his thing at the height of his game. I just thought, you'd feel lucky, like you'd feel lucky to have seen him. And they didn't win All Irelands, but at a time when there was a huge shift back towards Wexford football, and at times at the cost of the hurling, it felt for us. But Matty Ford was definitely the best footballer for me in the country at a time. And coming from Wexford, and coming from a place where there was no investment in football really when he was coming along, he'd have to be in there for the second GAA one for me.
Okay, right. That's a big call. The hurlers are going to be, I don't know if they're going to be up in arms, but they're going to be certainly a point of debate long into the night.
Yes, of course they'll be up in arms, but that's fine, Ger. That's fine.
Yeah, of course it is. You were raised in a house that played football though as well. Like obviously your brother played for Wexford, so you actually have an appreciation. You were a dual purpose house.
I don't know. He was kind of sneaking out and playing football. We always thought he'd play hurling, Ger, once he went off to play soccer in England, and he came back and he went straight into the Wexford hurling panel with John Myler, actually, even though he'd missed like the previous 5 years, hadn't lifted a hurling 5 years, and he was on the hurling panel within a couple of months. But that was Kieran's extraordinary talent. The football was obviously just closer to the soccer in terms of the nature of the game, and Wexford were on a serious rise at the time, or just coming into a rise, but actually they hadn't hit it yet on the field. But Red Barry and David Murphy and Matty, Colin Morris, all those fellas, they had a lovely dynamic. They had a lovely dynamic as a group. They were great friends. They were involved in each other's lives in a way that I was very envious of, actually, and told them so as a hurler, because at the time we didn't have that maybe strong dynamic. So I think once you have a totem, once you have somebody who you can kind of build that around, and Matty Ford definitely had that, or definitely was that. Kieran responded to the football and just an awful lot better, and went down that road. But yeah, we always thought he'd come back to the hurling. We thought he'd see sense and come back and play hurling, but it never happened in the end.
It's like I think he's always held up as Wexford's greatest ever footballer, Diarmuid, and I'd be keen to just tap into a little bit more of what you said previous to him about Sean O'Kennedy, and I'd be keen to hear what you have to say as well, Liam, just in terms of like when we hear about dual players, we always associate it with Cork or Galway and things like that. We don't necessarily associate Wexford with anybody who was great historically and winning All Irelands in both. But I think O'Kennedy has medals in both hurling and football, and also the great thing that kind of sticks out from history is that Wexford 4 in a row team, which we literally know nothing about, because like I think as far back, if you look outside of Kerry and Dublin for teams who've won consecutively, you think of Galway in the 60s perhaps, but that Wexford team is like an alien idea at this point, 100 years on. like O'Kennedy, is he a legend in Wexford, or is he a bit more of a cult figure when it comes to conversations around GAA?
Well, he was more of a legend in my part of the world for a long, long time, until it's faded now, because the captain of the team that won it in 1918 was Jim Byrne. He was a teacher in Kilran, and he was from Carlow originally. But Sean O'Kennedy would have been a part of Wexford folklore. I played a lot of football in colleges, won Munster football championships, beaten a lot in semi-finals, and I love football, and I always enjoyed football. The problem with Wexford would have been probably that if you were pro hurling, you were anti-football, and if you were pro football, you were anti-hurling, which is a load of nonsense. But people just go on with it all the time, and it's just cracked. I in favour of both in every club. But Sean O'Kennedy certainly deserves to be considered, but he's faded in history, and I suppose that's the reason why. Matty Ford was a magnificent footballer. My great memory of Matty Ford was the Wexford played Sligo in Wexford Park, and he went over to one sideline and put the ball over the bar with his right foot, and he went over to the far side. Now, I don't know if it was his left foot, but he put it over the bar. The goalkeeper kicked it away from him, and then went over the line of the far side. He went across and just put that over the bar. Like, he was the same as Maurice Fitzgerald. Like, he was a Maurice Fitzgerald, and Maurice Fitzgerald is a magnificent footballer. And that was a great Wexford football team, and there's some great players on it. And they got to an All-Ireland semi-final, and only for Matty went off at half-time, they've won that, and they've got to an All-Ireland final, in my opinion. They missed him in the second half and made a great comeback. So, like, we've had some great footballers. Willie Goodison played centre-back for Wexford, was a fantastic footballer in his time. Nicky Rackard, won a Leinster, well, he mightn't have won a Railway Cup medal, but he played for Wexford for senior footballers, and he played for Leinster in football. And that's something that's faded because of the hurling, but he did. But at that time it was easy to do it because everything was knockout. So, look, we've had some great footballers, and I couldn't argue with Diarmuid on Matty Ford. I think... he was poetry in motion. He beat us in a bloody county semi-final with 8 points and playing hurling, so that makes me sick. However,
I didn't know he was a great hurler as well.
He was an absolutely brilliant hurler, and he could point a ball from 70 and 80 yards without looking at it. He was a super hurler. If he'd have concentrated on hurling, he would have been one of the all-time greats in hurling as well. I'm convinced of it. So, he deserves it, and look, as Diarmuid said, he was poetry in motion on the football field, and for a big man, he looked fantastic. If we had 15 of them, it'd be brilliant.
Right.
By the way, I believe Wexford could contest 2 Leinster finals on the same day if we got our heads around it in hurling and football. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
We can come back to that at some point later on. We've got plenty of time, Liam, for over the next couple of months to be speculating about what the future might look like.
Yeah, we sure have.
Diarmuid, who's next?
I'm going to skip to the sun setting, actually, and I'm going to leave number 3 to Liam Griffin, I think, because this is where it turns into a minefield. I will go with into the facing a little bit more.
This is what's known as a suicide pass.
I mean, look, we'll go through and see. I could decide if there's any one of the 7 or 8 here, but definitely for me, in terms of like the sun setting in the west, there's a thing, I suppose, ritualistically thinking that when the sun sets, that it's not like the end of something but the beginning of something new. And Billy Walsh for me represents something that is in the Wexford character, in his sense of himself based on where he's from, a new way, a new mindset, and a new sense of himself, and a certainty, and an organisation, and a skill, and an ability to observe that I think is something that I'd love to bring forward, and I'd love for that to be a kind of a sense of Wexfordness that maybe that's changed from what it was. I don't know about that, but that's how I feel about it anyway. And Billy Walsh to me is I mean, I have such pride when I see him on the international stage, and when he was fighting his great fight with Ireland, and when he seemed to be definitely treated in a way that wasn't befitting of a man who had contributed so much. He shook it off so lightly, I felt. His skill as a boxer was one thing. I mean, Jim O'Sullivan won, I think, maybe 9 or 10 All-Irelands, but I think it was Billy went to the Olympics. So he as a boxer, he obviously cut it himself. But as a coach, he represents something exceptionally strong and certain, but is very, very rooted in who he is and where he's from. And he's a fella who I'd put up on Mt Rushmore in Wexford to say this is who we can be as well, you know.
Okay, right. I mean, it's not in any way, I don't think it's controversial at all because of his track record in the ring and outside the ring. Pardon me. And one of the few times where somebody from boxing ends up leading the main news when it ends up in that contract dispute, that's a sign of just the impact that he'd had. Right. So this leaves us like with a lot of people desperately trying to be the number 4 on the list.
Well, before I throw that one over to Liam, that fine hospital pass over to Liam, I will say, I mean, horse racing, Jim Bulger and Aidan O'Brien, horse trainers, I don't know, sports people, yeah, I suppose they are in some respects, but you're managing an animal who does something as opposed to like you're actually doing something yourself. Jamie Codd, when I saw Jamie Codd doing the interview, he had a great win last year and he did an interview on the television, and when I looked at him and I saw his bareness and his openness and his strength, I thought there's a great Wexford man, like Jamie Codd, great the jockey, great Wexford man. My own granduncle Dick Lyng won 9 All-Irelands, All-Ireland handball championships for Wexford, and a world championship in 1970 was bet, I think, on his 40th birthday, but by a 20-year-old Duxie Welch. And he brought a world championship, the first to Ireland, with Seamus Buggy in 1970. So when he's my uncle, I can definitely stick him in there somewhere. In rugby terms, Gordon Darcy, Tyke Furlong. I haven't really been watching a huge amount of rugby over the last few years. I believe Tyke Furlong is probably the best in his position in the world, or was for a little while. Anybody who gets to that level, sure, Jeannie Mac, they have to be in consideration. And then Gráinne Murphy for swimming, who has European medals. So Liam, yeah, best of luck with that one. Number 4 for me is Billy Walsh, and maybe Liam has other ones too that I definitely would like to hear as well.
Yeah, well, the Bull Ryan was a great handballer before your granduncle, and he won All-Ireland all around him. He actually toured with the Wexford team in '56 to America as well, but they weren't. America wasn't a place they were playing handball between Ireland and America until much later, but he was a magnificent handballer. I saw him playing a fella called Victor Sherlock, who was a great Cavan footballer in Wexford one time, but the Bull Ryan was the main man in Wexford handball for a long number of years as well. So, I can't argue with any of the names you put up. Look at Billy Walsh. Billy Walsh is a good friend of mine, I'd like to think, and I think the way he was treated in boxing was beyond belief, but we won't even go near there. But we brought Billy in to talk to the Wexford hurling team at the very start, and we brought in John Joe Doyle, a great runner, and John Joe was a veteran at that time. And we brought in several different fellas from different sports to exchange ideas with the players, and Billy was brilliant, and Billy made a comment that night which I thought was just fantastic. He said he got fed up playing hurling and football because he was dependent on too many other fellas, and they were half pissed some of the time, and it wasn't good enough for him. So he wanted to go and make something of himself, and then he said he concentrated on the boxing. And he was a great servant of the Fight Harriers and Sarsfields as well. So what would you say? I couldn't say anything against Billy. But sort of go on from there, I really at a loss. I mean, you mentioned Jim Bulger. Jim Bulger, don't forget, in terms of horse racing, he started from scratch and he built up an entire fantastic setup, and one first Wexford man one of the first Irish guys. Well, he wasn't, Vincent O'Brien was, but he won a derby, and that was as a Wexford man, and he came from scratch in racing. So Aidan O'Brien certainly is magnificent as well, and Aidan O'Brien went into Coolmore, but what he's done and what his family has done is just beyond belief. As a family, they'd have to come right up there at the top. So as a number 4, I actually don't know who the hell to pick, and that's a fact. I'd be going for George probably, because George is iconic, and look, he nearly broke my neck.
I'm happy with George to go in there for sure.
Yeah, but look, I don't want to be all GAA either. I can see where we're coming from, but we've one hurler in there. What about Bobby Rackard? For God's sake, Bobby Rackard is an incredible hurler as well, and Mark Christie ring and did very well in him. So, look, I'm not sure who I go for 4. I'm not sure. I just can't even think straight.
No.
Right this minute. There's so many names going around my head.
If I was picking a number 4 now, and I know going back in time and all the greats of the different sports is one thing, but another fella who definitely, when I saw him playing, and he played at the top of his game, but when he played in particular for Ireland, and he was Player of the Year twice, he is another fella who emitted all that I would like to see, and all that I feel is positive about the Wexford character and the Wexford nature, would be Kevin Doyle. soccer player. I just thought he had an honesty, a bare, open honesty and commitment to what he was doing without any ego that always I felt was very admirable. So I'd have no problem sticking Kevin Doyle in.
And Kevin Doyle's a gentleman as well, and he was always a good guy. But I just say, we're forgetting a fella called Jim Roach. I know he was knocked out early on, but he fought for a world heavyweight title, and he was the man who trained the Wexford 1914, that team. He trained that 4-in-a-row team. And don't forget as well, it was the fella I didn't know until Jim Gavin sent it to me, a fella called Jim Rossiter, or was it Jim Rossiter, who he sent a picture of him to me with a ring around him. He was on the 14 team and Menton was killed in the Battle of the Somme or somewhere like that, which, you know, I mean, God love him. As well, he's a Rossiter and he's from Wexford and he won all of the medal and he was killed in the First World War. So, and by the way, there was a slight on Wexford, by the way, which we must manage that slight. They maintained there was a war on around Kerry, but there was a war on when Wexford were as well. We were part for the Redmondites, and a lot of Wexford players had gone to war, so they can check off with themselves. They were 4-in-a-row, and they were fairly won, and we were the best team in the land at the time.
Is that what you're saying to Kerry, Eoin?
Exactly.
I was there.
We put up with a lot of stuff from Kerry on this show, Liam, but you're dead right. Any chance we get to do them over, we absolutely will. So look, we can't have a three-faced Mount Rushmore. Everybody will be wondering what the hell's going on. So in the running, let me narrow it down to a short list here. Kevin Doyle is definitely in the running. George O'Connor is definitely in the running. Diarmuid, we've nobody from that 96 team as it stands, and. Who else? Who else are we going? Is Tyke Furlong in the running? Are we down to 3? Is it?
You could give an honourable mention to the manager of that 1996 team as well.
No,
I know it'll be difficult. I know it'll be difficult when he's on the line. But I look in the mirror. I look in the mirror every day, and I know I know my position in sport, and that's a fact. I didn't do it, and that's all there's to it. And I never ever thought otherwise. Managers don't win matches. Managers don't win matches. If the players are not good enough, they won't win it. If the players are not good enough, they can't win it. And that's it. Sometimes, though, as a player, you need to be reminded of who you are, and I think that's what you brought 1996. Like, you're reminded Wexford people of who they were, and we've held on to that. So I think, like, anybody who has that kind of an impact on a county like that, that's a serious. Worthy of a mention, at least.
Yes, well, look, his line is gone, so we can be nice about it now while we're getting him back up. He was absolutely in consideration for this, 100%. Like, no ifs, ands or buts, he has to be, because, again, for anybody who ends a famine or who makes a breakthrough first, I think your point about the sun rising on Nicky Rackard is excellent. But we need a fourth side of this mountain, Diarmuid, so we're going to have to pick somebody.
Yeah, I'd be definitely willing to go off into. I'd be willing to go with Kevin Doyle. I just think I admire everything about how he went about his business, and I know that Tyke Furlong, I know that all of these other great sports people, and that's what they were, just great sports people and great people to represent their area, and did so in a certain way, and I love that about them. I suppose I was looking at a bit of soccer at the time with Kevin Doyle, and I thought, Jeannie Mac, like, there's an Irish international from just up the road in Adamstown with, I suppose I felt with good GA blood in him, so I felt I knew him, you know. I feel that with GA players, I suppose, and I got to know Stephen Hunt afterwards, who moved down to Wexford, and he carried that same thing, and all it is just identifying something and recognising something. I mean, if I met, I don't know, like Eric Cantona, who I actually did meet one time in Marseille, strangely enough, he's from a different world to me. But Kevin Doyle was just one of us, you know. And when he was on the international stage, I just thought he carried himself so well. So I know we're sacrificing a huge amount of fellas, and in some ways the GA fraternity, I'm not sure how they're going to be about me picking a soccer player for the fourth one, but Kevin Doyle was a great servant to Wexford, so I'd happily go with Kevin.
Nicky Rackard, Matty Ford, Kevin Doyle and Billy Walsh are Diarmuid's 4 on the Mount Rushmore.
Well, I'm going to say something now if I can.
Go for it.
From my perspective, I know Kevin Doyle, and he was a gentleman and he was a great player. I have to say, like, you know, from my point of view, if you want to pick him now, I'm a relation of his, so that might be biased, and you can factor that into it. But George O'Connor, 17 summers in purple and gold. I mean, and like what he gave for Wexford, I would say he would represent all of the guys in '96. We had some magnificent players on that Wexford team that had soldiers for so long. But George would have never been got a penny and never backed off. And he never would yield, as it says on the poem about him. But from my point of view, like 17 summers in purple and gold and never win anything. And myself and George had a pact that the All-Ireland final would be his last game of hurling. And because he'd nothing left to prove and nothing else was going to happen after that was going to be difficult. If ever he pulled a wrong stroke afterwards, he would never be forgiven. And look, he was some man. And I don't know how much more you have to prove yourself. But as regards hardship, sacrifice, and still keep a job down and do it, I would say that I don't think you'd be wrong. And George would represent that team of the 1996 and all the hurlers that had gone between the 70s and right through. So I would say that it'd be very, very, very hard to leave George out of that list if we're
okay, George, let's throw out the fear of bias. Let's not worry about the broadness or anything else. I'm with George O'Connor as well. I mean,
Okay.
what a man! Like what a man to jump! What a man to catch a ball! What a man off the field! What a man in terms of generosity of spirit with the young people of Wexford, with young players, with club people, with GAA people, sports people from all over the country. Just what a man! But the moustache has to be in there.
Peak 90s moustache. So let me recap then. The four are Nicky Rackard, Matty Ford, George O'Connor and Billy Walsh. And
it's a fine mount.
Everybody's agreed.
I fully back Billy Walsh because Billy Walsh was such a fantastic guy as well. We don't need to go over it again, but Billy Walsh certainly stellar kind of a guy. So I've no problem with Billy Walsh from that point. But you could pick four more as well. You could pick another four. We all know that.
But you can't because there's only four.
Exactly, that's the thing, and that's why it's so good. I've got a question for you, Liam. Where in the county is this Mt Rushmore located exactly? Whereabouts in Wexford is the Wexford Sports Mt Rushmore?
And the top of the black stairs so the Kilkenny fellas can see it as well.
Perfect.
And Blackstairs men who saw you
There's
then.
all of them still speak of you and pray, and Norman's Green where you have been to tell of what they saw. Anyway, go on, Diarmuid, let's finish it.
Right, so that's perfect. I did want to ask you both a little bit about, so we had Alan Milton on from the GAA earlier on, and they're like everybody waiting to see exactly what's going to happen with games this year. Liam, on a spiritual, psychological level, we all want to see some games when it's safe to do so. How important is it that we actually do get some activity this year? Or am I reading this completely wrong and actually it doesn't really matter if there's any games this year?
No, look at him. From my perspective, and we're in a close down in our own business, of course this is tough and it's very difficult. But the most important thing here is the health of the nation and the health of the people in it. And we've all family and friends and we want to see them alive and safe and well. So, look, we have to go with the HSE and what to say. The only thing that I think that could be considered, and maybe I'm talking from a backside, but I'd be fair to the HSE on it. If the kids could start to play, if the kids could go out and have a bit of fun and go and play a game, is there a danger in that? Is there a high danger? Is it or whatever? If they were just with coaches and things that could win and play a bit of hurling or football, wouldn't that be something for the kids at least? Because they must be going to be driven mad by not getting a chance to it and play games. I know I would have been if I was a child. And even if you could play some kids' blitzes or something, would that be possible? I don't know. But at adult level, I think forget about it. And I think we're not going to see a club championship, and I don't think we're not going to see an inter-county championship based on the evidence to date.
And you're right. We actually had Professor Luke O'Neill on last week, and he was saying that maybe the under-30s later on in the year might all actually be allowed to play. And that, first off, we'd have groups of more than 50 or being banned, and then it would be groups of more than 100 being banned. But that slowly we'd get a graduated response back. Like at this stage, any kind of scratch teams playing with vaguely recognisable people in jerseys of inter-county colour, we'd all just like to see it because it would be something for us to watch and kind of rally behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what Diarmuid's idea to take on it is, but it would be great. But look, look, hope is what we need now. We need hope. We need to be looking forward. We need to be able to stay positive. We need good things to happen. So we don't need to take big risks at this stage. Look what we've done so far. I'm locked in here as well, and I had a knee replacement. I'm trying to walk up and down the place, and look, it's tough going. But look forward. What's going to happen? I'm hearing birds and bees and things I never heard before now because I'm listening. My senses have changed, I suppose. But look, this is a sacrifice we have to make, and what we're doing, in fairness, is some of us are doing this to save other people's lives, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, and that's actually what we need to do. We don't need to be getting bravado about it and trying to push out the envelope, because that's not what we're told to do by the people who know better than us.
How is cocooning going for you, Liam?
It's going okay. Like reading books and looking at the Four Kings and Marvin Hagler and Leonard and all those on YouTube, and I never saw those fights, so I'm looking at bits and pieces of sport and getting through it. My poor long-suffering wife is probably have to put up with me around the house. Can you imagine putting up with me or doing with Lyng in the house with you all day long? But anyway, we're getting there.
Yeah, well, look, you've been great with your time this morning, Liam, and we wish you all the best with the cocooning as well. Diarmuid, how's your cocooning going? It sounds you've a busy house there.
Yeah, my cocooning is going very. I mean, I almost feel guilty saying it because I know that people are in certainly more dire straits than I am. But the move, I suppose, out of the city and down into the west here is definitely. I just said at this time, I suppose it's going fantastically. Like because there's not the place here isn't crowded with tourists. And we have probably the most beautiful part of the world just wide open to just the locals, and a lot of people aren't even leaving their houses, so we get to go on walks. Yeah, it's been fine. It's been fine, and I mean, the government has looked after obviously people like those who are self-employed and stuff like that. So I've had the benefit of that. So I feel like I've never had it so well in some respects. I see that other people don't have it so well, and it's been hotly debated as to what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. But it's going fine, and I'm definitely interested to see what the possibilities of sport are going forward. Ishna is after coming out on the deck here, and it's kind of hard to it's hard to it's hard to keep him away from it once he.
Sure, look. What better way to be?
Now he's gone. Now he's gone. But it is, it's interesting. It's a great idea, I think, from Liam talking about that the youngsters come back out, because I think you see in maybe in Iceland and Sweden and a few countries that it's really only the ones who are most who are in most threat are really being cocooned and isolated, and other than that there's a lot more social interaction. I do feel like down here, like they've closed off all of the beaches and stuff like that, and I find there's a lot of medicine in jumping in the sea in the morning, and have the beach closed off is a strange thing. Like I'm well able to go down and hold 2 meters from anybody else I see, because I'm able to think for myself, as I think the majority of other people are when you leave them to it. That has to be some of those restrictions. I find they're a little bit draconian, but I do see where also places were getting very crowded. That again, I think maybe points more to the amount of the Irish landscape that we're actually allowed access where private property says we can't. So some of those things I think definitely need to be lifted, because there's great medicine in those places for us as well. And then from a sporting point of view, if we could get kids' games going again and let them, they need, I think, very quickly to remove. Like I was watching something last night and I saw people shaking hands in it, and it's something distressed me in it. Like I felt this little small distressing signal point. I was like, Jeannie, where did that come from? And I think if I have it, who's living quite freely, I can imagine a lot of other people have it too. And if kids grow up with that, or if this stays and impacts their psyche in some way, where they believe that other people or nature or outside carries this disease and threat, and we have to have this fear, that's a very, very damaging long-term thing to have. Like, I still have some issue with chlorofluorocarbons from the ozone layer in the 80s because it was drilled into us for a summer in school, you know. So these things have a serious impact, and so the quicker we can get those things back to normal for young people, and have young people around young people, like 20s, 30s, 40s, young fit people around them, and not older people or very old people, obviously, the sooner we can get that up and running, the better. And I think a little bit more trust of people, I think you'll find they'll respond with the right behaviour too.
Great stuff, Diarmuid. Enjoy the beach when it reopens, and in the meantime, thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Thanks, Ger.
Thanks to Liam Griffin as well there for sharing their wisdom about who should be on Wexford's Mt Rushmore. You can be guaranteed this one will be controversial, but what a brilliant Mt Rushmore it is in the end. Billy Walsh, George O'Connor, Maddie Ford and Nicky Rackard. If you want to get in touch with us, 087 180 180 is the number here. It's going to be located at the top of the Black Stairs so the Kilkenny lads can see it. This seems to be an important aspect of this, Eoin, that your neighbours are taunted somehow by the sporting prowess.
Well, I think if you share a border with Kilkenny and your Mt Rushmore is made up by a lot of GAA legends, then I think you probably got to taunt your opponents with it, don't you?
Yeah. So we've actually got a bit of Billy Walsh. Do we have a bit of Billy Walsh talking? Was there? No. So we'll come back to that, right? One of the things that we've been doing recently here is we've been doing player ratings for Better Call Saul. We did this, started 5 weeks ago, was that right? 4 weeks ago anyway. And we've done seasons 1 through 4, where we've gone back and we've looked at the player ratings out of 10 to see who are the best performing characters. And it was very important that we get this done by today, because tonight, the last episode of season 5 is airing on Netflix.
Yeah, it's what a week for Netflix it is actually, between The Last Dance and Better Call Saul final episode going live within 24 hours of one another. So yeah, we've been one of the things that anybody's been watching this, anybody's been following the show and following what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, is this slow build that I think our player ratings have represented over the last 4 or 5 weeks, that every week it seems that the scores are consistently getting higher and higher, and they're almost playing the perfect game every single season, where you're kind of trying to nitpick to find a score below an 8 or a 9 sometimes with a lot of characters. Because what we've stumbled upon, and I'm not sure was this entirely deliberate when we chose Better Call Saul to start doing player ratings on and start binge watching, what we've stumbled upon is one of the best written shows ever in television. And anybody who's not been watching it should probably get on it if they've got a bit of time to actually binge watch at the moment. Anybody who is up to speed will know what I'm talking about when the current season that we are witnessing is right up there with the greats of television, the great seasons of television. The Breaking Bad versus Better Call Saul conversation is a real debate now because of what this team of writers have managed to do in season 5. A show that is a prequel and yet has you on the edge of your seat. That's a very, very rare thing. Scenes involving characters that we know are going to survive because they are central characters in Better Call Saul. We still fear for their safety. We still feel uncomfortable in certain situations. I will say, spoiler alert here for anybody who hasn't got up to speed. Just in case I let anything slip. Okay. I'm just saying, there is a huge amount of tension that has been created in this season, and as I say, there are essential characters under threat. And for a prequel, it's pretty stunning that is something that we feel uncertain about.
Yeah. So I had watched the first season when it came out at the time, and then kind of drifted away, and have been thrilled by the fact that we've been able to binge it. I think I'm anxious about what's going to happen next year when I have to wait week by week by week, or whenever it comes out. It could be 18 months. They haven't been popping these out with any regularity. There's been kind of a long enough wait. So I would certainly recommend anybody who hasn't watched it, of all of the stuff that's out there at the minute, ignore Tiger King. You've got to get on this. Tiger King's just a waste of your time compared to this stuff. Tiger King is like, the third egg you eat on Easter Sunday, when actually you know that's just diminishing returns at this point. Actually, more making you more likely to puke than anything else. And this is the one that you're going to find it hardest to shift in your future. Whereas really, you should have just waited and spent all your time with the quality.
Well, like if we're talking about like if we're talking about Mt Rushmores this morning and some of the great TV shows of the last 10, 15 years, like this television show has to be nudging itself towards that. Is that hyperbole?
Well, I definitely would like to wait a while. The point about great art is it's supposed to sit with you for a long time afterwards, right? So I can honestly say that The Sopranos has and The Wire have.
Yeah, so post-Sopranos, post-Wire. That the post-Sopranos and Wire era is what I'm talking about here. Last 10, 15 years.
I would include The Sopranos and The Wire in the last 10, 15 years because they're the founding text of good quality TV. So they're the first two on Mt Rushmore, right? After that, it's the conversation. Does Mad Men make it? For a lot of people, it does. I haven't gone back and watched Mad Men again. And yet it certainly had a massive influence in the culture. This is right there. It is absolutely right there. You just want to, give it a little bit of time to settle down.
Yeah, and maybe it doesn't. I'm trying to kind of even be devil's advocate to my own opinion here. Where does this not sit well in the long-term running of it? Is it going to fall short of that level because of the fact that it is a prequel and because of the fact that perhaps in the early seasons you don't have the explosive energy that you would have had in Breaking Bad? For me, I don't think that will be an issue whatsoever. I think people will remember the build. People will have remembered sitting with this thing and allowing the story to soak into their veins as the years roll by. For me, it's been a process of, as the weeks roll by, and it's been unbelievably fulfilling actually seeing these characters develop and grow and your opinions on them change drastically. It's an achievement in writing is what this is. Game of Thrones, for example, was an achievement in television making and cinema on the small screen. This is an achievement in writing. I would say that this is now, as you say, we will have to wait to see how Better Call Saul concludes, and if season 6 is going to be the last season or whatever, and then we can compare it to something like Game of Thrones. But I think that the legacy of that television show. So just to reiterate, talking about the 2010s and into this decade, Game of Thrones will be sitting at the top, but it obviously harmed its legacy by the horrific conclusion to the television show.
I don't know if it is.
We have to wait.
I think that when something finishes as badly as Game of Thrones finished, it automatically undoes most of the good work that happened before that.
Without question. I still think because of the heights it reached, it is within the conversation, but I think it slipped to behind Breaking Bad as a result to how it finished. I was personally a huge fan of how Breaking Bad finished. At least there was something a little bit unexpected, and it didn't fall flat. Breaking Bad did not fall flat at the end, and that was a great achievement of that conclusion. Game of Thrones most certainly did. It was a chronic, it was a bottle job by the writers at HBO to finish that television show the way it did. You don't get the sense that Better Call Saul will conclude in a certain way because it is really an extension of Breaking Bad. These writers have got better. They are actually, the way they managed to inform us in terms of how we should be viewing Saul Goodman and how that changes over the course of 5 seasons is as impressive as the way our opinion of Walter White in Breaking Bad changed over a longer period of time. So these guys are getting better. I know that there's been some younger writers who've been promoted as time has gone by within the Breaking Bad team. These are clearly up to scratch. These clearly aren't trying to find their feet in television writing. They've clearly learned from the best in terms of the staff at Breaking Bad, and they're changing this universe into something far more rewarding than Breaking Bad was on its own. It's not really exactly a challenging list, but in terms of the best things I've done all lockdown, this is right up at the top of that list.
Okay. So, do you expect somebody to die tonight? We've got a couple of minutes left here, and I'm going to read some comments. But last question on this: do you expect somebody to die? Don't tell me who, but if you do, yes or no?
Yes, obviously. It's an episode 10, and there will be unbelievable amounts of tension. Somebody will come extremely close to death, and there are certain characters that aren't in Breaking Bad, and you just have to fear for them at all times.
So obviously we've been tweeting about Mt Rushmore this morning. Rayo Barreler Byrne, who has been in touch. That's his own handle. At Rayo Ballier is his actual handle. Tea, pints, black pudding, football, all those things I miss about home. The weather, moaning F's, Fine Gael, things I don't. Ballyfermot, Wolf Island, etc. Right? And if it's Wexford, it's going to be hurlers. Why do you insist on putting rugby players in these things? They don't give a bollocks about rugby, he says. This was obviously 15 hours ago, before he realised that we didn't put any rugby players on. That Tyke Furlong didn't make it, which I think was a bit of a surprise in the end.
that one of the lads who won a Grand Slam and who are so associated with those teams and who are so associated with Wexford didn't make the Mount Rushmore, I think, is a surprise. I would have heard an argument for Darcy over Furlong, no question about it. I am surprised that neither of them made it.
Yeah, maybe we should have reminded our guest, Liam Griffin, that famously Gordon Darcy actually worked in one of his hotels. That might have helped. Would it have helped?
I'm not quite sure. It depends what sort of worker he is and what sort of a job he did in the hotel. I'm not sure. I think that it was always going to be hard to persuade away from hurling and GAA on this occasion. But then again, there was a footballer who made it, there was a boxing coach who made it, so I don't think there was too much hurling bias in the list at the end of the day. But I think that I'm really enjoying these conversations. I'm learning so much about all these counties. Yeah. The Offaly and Wexford conversations in particular have been really fulfilling.
Okay, The Last Dance is out tonight. We'll have instant recaps and reviews with that with Kieran Donaghy, Jarlath Regan, Ronan Mullen and yourself. The Classic Game Club you did about the flu game was brilliant. You can get that wherever you get your podcast. The best place for us is on the Off The Ball website, offtheball.com, or of course you can also get it on the Go Loud app. If you missed anything, sports pages and the latest news, the GAA Director of Communications, Alan Milton, Wexford's Mt Rushmore, Diarmuid, Lyng and Liam Griffin, the whole thing is timestamped wherever you get your podcasts or on our YouTube channel, so you can click through and fast forward to the bits that you really want to see. Off the Ball's back tonight from 7. In the meantime, plenty for you to catch up on. The Sunday paper review with Bernard Jackman and Sarah O'Donovan, feature-length interview with Ronnie Whelan. I was going to say Ronnie O'Sullivan. Ronnie Whelan, a feature interview with Brian Kerr talking about the World Cup in '66. All 13 of our Classic Game Club so far. John Giles talking about the passing of his friend and former teammate Norman Hunter. And Lee Westwood, our special guest this week on Golf Weekly. We'll see you tomorrow morning from 7:30 until 10. Best of luck.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the Ball.